Chapter 29:31. However, just as the battle was about to begin, four terrifying auras suddenly erupted in the North Sea, West Sea, East Sea, and South Sea. Qin Feiyang and Frenzy were shocked as they hurriedly soared into the sky and looked in all four directions. Did they start fighting so soon? That's not right. Long Zun had mastered the laws of space and time, so he shouldn't have gone to the four seas. Wait a minute. These four auras weren't from people they were familiar with. In other words, it wasn't the Sword Emperor and the other three fighting with the dragons. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled slightly as he looked in the direction of the North Sea. What's wrong? Frenzy was surprised. Below, Prince Dragons also looked at him suspiciously. The owner of the aura in the North Sea seems to be that old man. Qin Feiyang said. Old man? What old man? Frenzy was suspicious. Yi's master, the guardian of the North region. Qin Feiyang said word by word. The guardian of the North region. Frenzy immediately looked in the direction of the North Sea. The guardians appeared so quickly? Prince Dragons couldn't help but be shocked as a trace of worry appeared on his face. Since the aura in the North Sea was the guardian of the North region, then the auras in the West Sea, East Sea, and South Sea must also be the guardians of the three major regions. The appearance of the four guardians at the same time must be because of his mother and his clansmen. Although he had never seen the four guardians and didn't know their true strength, but to be able to restrict his mother to divine land, they must have extremely powerful means. Now that the four of them attacked at the same time, would his mother and his clansmen be in danger? All of this seemed to be slow, but the entire process happened in an instant. The space crack opened by Qin Batian and Long Zun was about to be completely closed. But at this moment, a group of people retreated from the two space cracks. These people were Qin Batian, Long Zun, and the others. What's going on? Qin Feiyang and the other two were stunned. Didn't they leave? Why did they come back? At the same time, Qin Batian and the others, as well as the dragons' group, were all surprised. Obviously, they didn't know what was going on either. But Long Zun's entire body was emitting a bone-piercing chill. Whoosh! Long Zun soared into the sky and swept his gaze over the four sea regions. He angrily said, "You four old bastards, are you done yet?" Qin Feiyang glanced at Long Zun. Could all of this have something to do with the four guardians? Following closely, Qin Feiyang and the madman looked at each other, and instantly landed beside Qin Batian and the others. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, "Ancestor, what's going on?" Qin Batian said, "Just now, a mysterious force suddenly appeared and forcefully cut off the space-time teleportation, forcing us back." What? Even space-time teleportation can be forcibly cut off? Qin Feiyang and madman were shocked. Qin Batian glanced at the flustered and exasperated Long Zun, then looked at the four sea regions and murmured, "The aura of the four guardians." Qin Batian pondered for a moment and said, "I think it should be related to the four guardians. How terrifying would it take to cut off the space-time teleportation?" Qin Feiyang was in disbelief. He turned to look at Yi Zhong and asked, "Master, do you know what's going on?" Although this old man knows that it's because of the four guardians that Long Zun can't leave the divine land, I'm not sure about the specific situation. Yi Zhong shook his head. At the same time, the dragons also flew to Long Zun and asked suspiciously, "Mother, what's wrong?" "Those four damn old things are sealing off the divine land," Long Zun said angrily. Sealing off the divine land? The dragons were stunned. Hearing this, he heaved a sigh of relief, because in this way, his mother couldn't send people to the four regions to kill those innocent creatures. But, to be able to forcibly cut off the space-time teleportation, the strength of the four guardians was a bit terrifying. Boom! The power of the four seas became more and more terrifying. Suddenly, waves of divine light, like a tide, rushed in from all directions at an extremely fast speed. In just a few breaths, this divine light covered the entire sky of the divine land. At this moment, if one stood at the top of the clouds and looked down at the divine land, they would see a shocking scene. The entire divine land was shrouded in a huge barrier at this time. This barrier was formed by the divine light, emitting a terrifying aura. Damn it, damn it! Long Zun looked at this barrier and roared again and again. Mother, who is this? The dragons were bewildered. Heavenly prison. Long Zun said word by word, extremely furious. Heavenly prison? The dragons were stunned. Qin Feiyang and the others also curiously sized up heavenly prison when they heard this name. Long Zun, don't blame us. It's you who tried to send people to the 4 regions to kill the innocent. An old voice suddenly came from the direction of the North Sea. That's the voice of that old man. Qin Feiyang was shocked. Long Zun roared. Old bastard, I didn't personally go to the 4 regions. Whether you went personally or not, as the protectors of the 4 regions, we will not allow you to harm the creatures of the 4 regions. This is the condition we agreed on before. We will not interfere in the affairs of the divine land, and you are not allowed to harm the creatures of the 4 regions. Now you are the one who broke the promise first. A woman's voice sounding extremely old and hoarse. Good, very good. Long Zun was so angry that he laughed. Looking at the dragons, he shouted, quickly use the ice dragon's sacred sword to split open this heavenly prison. Mother, the dragons frowned. What? You don't even listen to me. Long Zun said angrily. The dragons sighed. Holding the ice dragon's sacred sword, he rushed into the sky and slashed at the heavenly prison with all his strength. With a loud bang, the powerful ice dragon holy sword was actually unable to break through the heavenly prison. The heavenly prison only trembled a few times before it calmed down. The prince of the dragon clan was stunned. Qin Feiyang and the others were also stunned. Even the sovereign divine weapon can't break open the heavenly prison. This is too strong. Long Zun, you know how powerful the heavenly prison is. Even your heavenly dragon god sword can't break it, let alone this ice dragon sacred sword. Although this ice dragon sacred sword is also a sovereign divine weapon, it is still a lot worse than the heavenly dragon god sword. At the top of the sky, an old man descended, looked down at Long Zun, and said lightly, Greetings, senior. As soon as Qin Feiyang saw the old man, he immediately bowed and saluted. That's right. This person is Lin Yi's master. He was still the same as before, wearing tattered clothes. However, his thin and weak figure was even more imposing than a mountain. Young man, long time no see. The sloppy old man nodded and smiled. Where is he? Qin Feiyang asked. The sloppy old man waved his hand, and a peerless figure appeared. Who else could it be but Lin Yi? After so many years, she was still so beautiful and refined. Wearing a white dress, she was spotless like a fairy, exuding an ethereal temperament. Brother Feiyang. Lin Yi spoke. Hearing this name, Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled suddenly and asked, Should you regain your memory? No. Lin Yi shook her head, and a trace of disappointment immediately appeared on her face. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel a trace of disappointment and smiled. It doesn't matter. Even if you don't regain your memory, you will always be my sister. Lin Yi nodded. The sloppy old man looked down at Long Zun and sighed. Don't be stubborn. Shut up. Long Zun yelled angrily. Can't you see that even your children don't want you to harm the creatures of the 4 territories? The sloppy old man said. The Prince of Dragons glanced at the old man, then looked at Long Zun, and couldn't help but sigh. Long Zun clenched his hands, looked at the Prince of Dragons and shouted, Continue, I don't believe that I can't break this heavenly prison. Sigh. The Prince of Dragons sighed and waved the ice dragon's sacred sword again, slashing at the heavenly prison. Boom. Accompanied by a loud noise, the heavenly prison was not damaged at all. Let the ice dragon's soul out. Long Zun said angrily. The Prince of Dragons said, Mother, I have already used all my strength. There is no need to let him out. Immediately, right now. Long Zun roared. All right. The Prince of Dragons nodded and then closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, a fierce aura suddenly roared out. Is it really so strong? The ice dragon's soul stared at the heavenly prison and smiled. Boom. Immediately, he activated the divine art that increased his cultivation, and instantly stepped into the perfect undead realm. Clang. Immediately, the ice dragon's soul held the ice dragon's sacred sword, and slashed at the heavenly prison frantically. Boom. However, The heavenly prison was still unharmed. How is this possible? The ice dragon soul's eyes widened in anger. So strong, simply invincible. Qin Feiyang and the others looked at the heavenly prison with deep shock in their eyes. Seeing this scene, Long Zun was about to go crazy. He roared, "Everyone, attack together!" Boom. The various ancestral dragons and tens of thousands of supreme experts all activated their strongest divine arts and charged at the heavenly prison. Kill. The ice dragon's soul came back to his senses and was filled with anger. The three profound meanings of the law of light, the sword of light, the sword of judgment, and the holy sword of light appeared at the same time. He was furious and his face was filled with dissatisfaction. As he waved his hand, the three profound meanings shattered in all directions and followed the ice dragon's sacred sword toward the heavenly prison. Boom. A loud noise that shook the heavens resounded. However, although all the supreme experts of the dragons and the ice dragon's soul had all attacked, the heavenly prison still existed when the dust settled. The ice dragon's soul was completely dumbfounded. Even this could not break the heavenly domain? A deep sense of powerlessness appeared in Long Zun's eyes. The sloppy old man, who had been watching silently, finally spoke at this moment. As I said before, as long as you don't harm the four major regions, this old man will not intervene in the affairs of Divine Land. Now the entire Divine Land is your battlefield. Continue. Long Zun looked at the sloppy old man with resentment, then looked at the ice dragon soul and shouted, "Kill Qin Feiyang and the others for me." "Yes, mother." The ice dragon soul sneered, grabbed the ice dragon's sacred sword, turned around, and looked directly at the madman's bloody eyes. "Continue to petrify this prince if you have the ability." Clang. The ice dragon holy sword trembled, releasing a world-destroying sharpness that blotted out the sky and covered the earth as it rushed towards madman. Lin Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and the others worriedly, then looked at the sloppy old man, and asked, "Master, are we really not going to help?" Silly girl. Although the heavenly prison can seal off Divine Land, it has no lethality. So even if I take action, it is impossible to defeat the dragons. In this battle, Qin Feiyang and the others have to work hard. The sloppy old man sighed. Hearing this, Lin Yi did not say anything more. She looked down at Qin Feiyang and the others with worry. Chapter 2932. The ice dragon's sacred sword emitted an apocalyptic aura as it tore through the chaos and pointed at Madman. "Senior brother Madman, come back!" Qin Feiyang hurriedly shouted. This time, Madman didn't try to show off. Hearing Qin Feiyang's shout, he immediately retreated to Qin Feiyang's side and closed his blood eye at the same time. "What should we do?" Yi Zhong looked solemnly at the murderous soul of the ice dragon. He thought that the dragon god sword would be destroyed and the situation would be stabilized. But he never expected that another ice dragon's sacred sword would appear. As a sovereign divine weapon, who could compete with the ice dragon's sacred sword. Qin Batian and the others were also worried. Just now, the Northern Region Guardian said that the ice dragon's sacred sword in the hands of the dragon's prince doesn't seem to be comparable to the dragon god sword. The Sunset Divine Bow suddenly spoke. Qin Feiyang said, "He said so, but it is still a sovereign divine weapon. If it really can't compare to the dragon god sword, then we can give it a try," the Sunset Divine Bow said. "That's right. We have cultivated in the land of Source for so many years, and have long surpassed the boundary of heaven-defying divine weapons. If we join forces, we might be able to fight," Axe said. "Then let's do it. Victory or defeat depends on this," the Sunset Divine Bow roared. Boom. Immediately, apart from Snowflake and Bloodblade, all 15 heaven-defying divine weapons were fully awakened. The Blood Demon Tower and Sacred Dragon Sword were both injured, so they couldn't make a move now. But there was still the Black Demon Spear, Phoenix Blade, Death Scythe, and Dragon Slaying Sword. Although these 4 heaven-defying divine weapons had never been to the land of Source, they could still be awakened. Clang! The 15 heaven-defying divine weapons instantly entered a fully awakened state. Kill! With the roar of the Sunset Divine Bow, the various heaven-defying divine weapons immediately charged toward the ice dragon soul with destructive power. A bunch of ants dare to compete with the sun and moon. The ice dragon's soul's face was full of disdain. The ice dragon's sacred sword furiously slashed through the sky, and the sword chi immediately roared towards the various divine artifacts. It was our own choice to follow Qin Feiyang back then. So no matter what happens now, we will advance and retreat with him. Kill. The sunset bow roared. From afar, the various heaven-defying divine artifacts were like moths flying into a flame. With the determination to fight to the death, they pounced towards the ice dragon holy sword. Clang. Rumble. The sword chi of the ice dragon holy sword could be said to be monstrously terrifying. The snowflakes and blood blades immediately shattered. Following closely, the black demon spear, the heavenly phoenix saber, the death god's scythe, and the dragon-slaying sword. These 4 heaven-defying divine artifacts from the Nether King's hell shattered one after another. However, the axe, the sunset bow and the other 10 heaven-defying divine artifacts tenaciously held on, shattering the sword chi one after another as they crazily rushed towards the ice dragon holy sword. Clang! The thick earth shield took the lead and clashed with the ice dragon holy sword. Immediately, with a cracking sound, the shield of earth shattered on the spot. The 7-star staff followed closely behind. Clang! As sparks splattered, it also broke on the spot. The sky-breaking halberd charged forward again, but it was also instantly severed by the ice dragon holy sword. Haha! Ants, all of you are ants. The ice dragon's soul laughed loudly. The ice dragon holy sword was invincible. The remaining sunset bow and other heaven-defying divine artifacts were also severed by the ice dragon holy sword one after another. They had no power to fight at all. Too strong. It's too strong. Looking at this scene, Qin Feiyang and others trembled in their hearts. This is the sovereign divine weapon. Even if the ice dragon holy sword is only the lowest level of sovereign divine weapon now, it's not something a heaven-defying divine artifact can contend with. The sloppy old man sighed. Then in this battle, doesn't Brother Feiyang and the others have no chance of winning? Lin Yi asked. If it were someone else, this old man is already sure that the human side will be wiped out. But Qin Feiyang, this person. There are too many possibilities on him. I think there might be a miracle, the sloppy old man said. Miracle? Lin Yi murmured, looking down at Qin Feiyang. Her worried face was full of expectation and confidence. Yes, this man is full of miracles. He can definitely lead everyone to victory. Continue. The sunset bow roared. Even if it was broken, the heaven-defying divine artifacts did not give up. They used their last strength to attack the ice dragon holy sword. Clang. Boom. Accompanied by a series of loud noises, the terrifying ice dragon holy sword tore the heaven-defying divine artifacts into pieces like cutting vegetables. The fragments flew all over the sky. The light of these heaven-defying divine artifacts dimmed immediately. Enough. Come back. Qin Feiyang sighed. Whoosh. Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, the fragments of the heaven-defying divine artifacts immediately cut through the sky and landed in front of Qin Feiyang. I'm sorry. It's our incompetence. The sunset bow's spirit said weakly. It's not your fault. You have tried your best. It's just that it's too strong. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. The sunset bow said, but even we can't match it, then who else? There's still me. Qin Feiyang said. You. The sunset bow was shocked. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, leave the rest to me. Finished. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the fragments of the heaven-defying divine artifacts to the Black Tortoise realm. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Batian and the others and said, you guys also go to the Black Tortoise realm to hide for a while. You. Qin Batian's face changed. But before Qin Batian could say anything, Qin Feiyang sent everyone to the Black Tortoise realm. At this point, only Qin Feiyang was left outside. The ice dragon's spirit looked at Qin Feiyang and said in shock, are you crazy? You dare to stay outside alone? Yes. I'm indeed going crazy. Qin Feiyang nodded his head. It was not easy to destroy the dragon god sword, and now an ice dragon holy sword appeared. If it was anyone else, they would have collapsed. However, Qin Feiyang was even more clear that anyone could collapse, but he could not. Because if even he collapsed, then the human side would completely lose. He had to stand up and fight. Even if he had to die in this battle, he would not hesitate. All right. This prince will fulfill your wish. After I kill you, I'll go to the Black Tortoise realm to kill all your family and friends, and wash the Black Tortoise realm with blood. The Ice Dragon's soul laughed wildly as it waved the Ice Dragon holy sword in its hand. Countless sword chi immediately turned into a torrent and pounced towards Qin Feiyang. Inside the Black Tortoise realm. At this moment, everyone was looking at the scene in the sky. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. This guy always likes to show off, Madman said angrily. Indeed. But right now, only he can shoulder this heavy burden. What he muttered. Outside, Qin Feiyang stood against the wind, quietly watching the arrival of the sword chi. Lin Yi exclaimed, Brother Feiyang, quickly make a move. Why is he standing still? That's a sovereign divine weapon. Isn't standing there waiting for death? Long Zun and others looked at Qin Feiyang's reaction, and were extremely surprised. Sitting still and waiting for death. This doesn't seem to be Qin Feiyang's character. What is he brewing? Are you giving up? The Ice Dragon's soul couldn't help but frown. But Qin Feiyang turned a deaf ear, and ignored everyone's gaze. At this moment, his entire person was unprecedentedly calm as he said silently, Ancient Castle, can the power of the sovereign divine weapon help you break the seal? That's right. This is what I'm going to do next. With the power of the Ice Dragon Holy Sword, I will break the seal of the Ancient Castle. Because now, only the Ancient Castle can compete with the Ice Dragon Holy Sword. The Ancient Castle has been integrated with the Black Tortoise realm for many years. Even the Sunset Divine Bow, a heaven-defying divine weapon, has grown so much. Maybe the Ancient Castle has now evolved into a sovereign divine weapon. I hope so. Qin Feiyang muttered secretly, suddenly looked up at the sword chi and shouted, Come on! Immediately after. He didn't retreat but took a step forward to meet it. That terrifying sword chi instantly engulfed him. Everyone was dumbfounded. What's the difference between this and courting death? I understand. Black Tortoise Realm. The little boy muttered, suddenly looked at the ancient castle and shouted. Everyone listen to my order. Immediately activate your divine power and pour it into the ancient castle. What? Everyone looked at him in surprise. Do it. The little boy roared. Okay. Immediately, everyone in the Devil's Land released their divine power and poured it into the ancient castle. Clang. The ancient castle immediately trembled slightly, exuding a weak light. It works? The little boy was shocked. At the same time, outside, the Ice Dragon Holy Sword Chi finally drowned Qin Feiyang. It was also at this moment. Streaks of black light suddenly emerged from between Qin Feiyang's eyebrows. As soon as this black light appeared, it covered Qin Feiyang's whole body. That terrifying sword chi was actually blocked outside by the black light. How is this possible? The Ice Dragon's soul was stunned. What is this thing that can block the sword chi of a sovereign divine weapon? Outside the heavenly prison, the sloppy old man also showed a look of surprise. There was also a hint of joy in Lin Yi's bright eyes. This man is indeed full of miracles. Looking at Qin Feiyang again. At the moment when the black light emerged, his heart was also overjoyed. Because the black light not only protected him, but also absorbed the power of the sword chi. And, as the owner of the ancient castle, he could also clearly feel that there was a majestic divine power pouring into the ancient castle at this moment. His mind sank into the Black Tortoise realm, and immediately saw the scene in the Devil's Land. The power of the Ice Dragon Holy Sword alone shouldn't be able to break the seal of the ancient castle, so I let everyone integrate their divine power into the ancient castle. How about we work together from the inside and outside? Let's see if we can forcefully break the little beast's seal. The little boy's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Thank you. Qin Feiyang thanked him, then withdrew his mind, looked up at the Ice Dragon's soul and roared. Is this all you can do? Courting death. In the face of Qin Feiyang's clamor, the Ice Dragon's soul was furious. It landed in front of Qin Feiyang and slashed with its sword. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed, and he didn't dodge at all. He stepped forward and faced the Ice Dragon Holy Sword with his glabella. Boom. The tip of the Ice Dragon Holy Sword immediately fell on Qin Feiyang's glabella. An earth-shattering sharpness suddenly rushed toward Qin Feiyang's glabella. Despite the protection of the black light, the glabella quickly split open, and blood flowed out. His sea of consciousness suffered a fatal blow. It collapsed and shattered. The black light that protected Qin Feiyang also began to shatter. Not good. Qin Feiyang was shocked. If this black light collapsed, the sharpness of the Ice Dragon Holy Sword could instantly destroy him. Chapter 2933. Arrogant. Let's see how long you can be arrogant for. The Ice Dragon's soul grinned, its words filled with ferocity. The Ice Dragon's sacred sword's sharpness could topple mountains and overturn seas. A fatal danger shrouded his heart. Still not enough. Qin Feiyang roared in his heart. Still not enough? Black Tortoise World. The little boy couldn't help but frown. All the strongest cultivators of the Black Tortoise World were now in the demonic land, including the Dragon Slayer Temple. This was all the power they had. They still couldn't break the seal of the golden small beast? Wait. Suddenly, the little boy was shocked. The real hope wasn't the strongest cultivators of the undead stage, but the ordinary beings of the Black Tortoise World. Although the strongest cultivators were strong, their numbers were limited. However, there were billions of ordinary beings. Although they weren't as strong as the undead stage, their numbers were huge. There was a saying that went, "It takes two to clap." As long as all the beings of the Black Tortoise World worked together, there was nothing that couldn't be done. Thinking of this, the little boy immediately closed his eyes. Friends of the Black Tortoise World, I'm sorry to disturb you again. The battle with the Dragon Clan this time is more difficult than we imagined. We really have no other choice, so we still need your help. I implore everyone, whether you're a human or a beast, to raise your hands and release your divine power. I need your help, the Black Tortoise World needs your help, and Qin Feiyang needs your help even more. I'm free of you. Immediately, the little boy's voice sounded in the minds of all the beings of the Black Tortoise World, full of sincerity. What's going on? You still need our help. We've already given so much blood. And now you want us to give up our divine power? What's going on? And this voice, it's not the Lord Ruler at all. Is this real or fake? The entire Black Tortoise World fell into chaos. Believe me, this is all real. We really need your help. The little boy's voice sounded again. Everyone was uncertain. Because they had never heard the little boy's voice before, they didn't know who he was, so they couldn't determine if it was real or fake. See for yourselves. The little boy waved his hand, and a vast power instantly enveloped the entire Black Tortoise World. Following closely, various images appeared in the sky above the Black Tortoise World. On the screen, it was the scene of Qin Feiyang and the Ice Dragon Soul fighting. It's the Lord Sovereign. He's still fighting outside. Wait. What level is that sword? How could its aura be so terrifying? At this moment, whether it was humans or dire beasts, whether it was adults or children, they all looked at the scene in the sky, their faces full of shock. Central State. The people of the dragon-slaying palace did not need to explain in detail. When they saw this scene, they knew that it was real. Because they understood the situation outside, they immediately raised their hands and poured out their divine power without holding back. However, the beings of the eastern, northern, and southern regions knew nothing about the situation in the ancient world. Therefore, they were still hesitating. They were worried that the scene they were seeing now was all faked by the little boy. This is a sovereign divine weapon, an existence that can destroy our Black Tortoise World. What's even more terrifying is that the dragons have more than one sovereign divine weapon. If Qin Feiyang dies outside, our Black Tortoise World will also be destroyed. That's why I'm begging everyone, please release your divine power, and lend us a hand. The little boy roared. What? More than one sovereign divine weapon? In the sky above a certain city, Pai Lupi and Theta Wang's eyes trembled. Brothers and sisters, friends, family. He's not joking, it's all true. Pai Lupi looked at the people in the city below and roared. Although the little boy was in the demonic land, he could still hear Pai Lupi's voice and couldn't help but feel moved. He immediately transmitted his voice. Your prestige in the Black Tortoise World is higher than mine and Qin Feiyang's. Quickly tell them. That's not a problem. But we don't have the means to let all the beings in the Black Tortoise world hear our words. Pai Lupi said. I can. Just say it. The little boy hurriedly said. Okay. Brothers, friends, I am Pai Lupi. I am Theta Wang. What you've seen is real. The dragons are the rulers of the ancient world, but they are cruel and merciless. Whether it's humans or beasts, they are all ants in their eyes. Right now, the Lord Ruler is fighting a bloody battle with them outside, not for himself, but for the ancient world, for all living beings under the heavens. So, please lend a helping hand. Helping the Lord Ruler is also helping ourselves. Pai Lupi and Theta Wang spoke one after another. It's real. Brothers, these two lords won't lie to us. Okay. We'll help. But we have a request. Don't scatter the images of the Lord Ruler's battle. We want to watch the entire battle. We want to see the Lord Ruler defeat the dragons with our own eyes. The beings in the Black Tortoise world immediately roared. Okay. I promise you. The little boy was wild with joy. Immediately, all the beings in the Black Tortoise world released their divine power without holding back. In an instant, the sky above the Black Tortoise world turned into a sea of divine power. And those who hadn't stepped into the war god realm, they also released their battle auras. I thank you on behalf of Qin Feiyang. Seeing this scene, the little boy's eyes couldn't help but moisten. Then, he waved his little hand, and the divine power and battle aura that filled the sky instantly turned into a long river that surged in from all directions. Thank you, everyone. Yi Zhong and the others silently said in their hearts. Yes. Although the dragons had two sovereign divine weapons, Qin Feiyang had hundreds of millions of living beings behind him. All of them were his backing. Boom. The majestic divine power and battle aura surged in, endlessly pouring into the ancient castle. The ancient castle suddenly shook, and rays of even more brilliant divine light bloomed. At the same time, outside, Qin Feiyang's situation was precarious. The dark light protecting him had reached its limit. Clang. But just as the dark light was about to shatter, a muffled explosion sounded in his sea of consciousness. Then, an even more majestic dark light rolled out from between his eyebrows. The sharpness of the ice dragon's sacred sword was completely blocked. This is impossible. Seeing this scene, the ice dragon's soul shook violently, its face filled with disbelief. Thank you. Thank you so much, Qin Feiyang muttered in his heart. Because he already knew what happened in the Black Tortoise world. All the living beings were helping him at this moment. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I won't let you down. And at this moment, the living beings in the Black Tortoise world saw Qin Feiyang's face and heard Qin Feiyang's voice through the screen. Lord Sovereign, you have to do your best. We will always support you. Everyone shouted. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, looked at the ice dragon's soul, and said, See, even if I stand here without moving, you can't hurt me. I don't believe it. The ice dragon's soul was furious, raised the ice dragon's sacred sword, and once again attacked Qin Feiyang. Long Zun shouted, Let's hurry and help. Boom. Tens of thousands of dragons immediately released their divine power, carrying a destructive aura, and attacked Qin Feiyang, their eyes flashing with killing intent. Chapter 2934. Despicable. So many people actually joined forces against the Lord Ruler. The living beings of the Black Tortoise world were filled with anger when they saw this scene. But they didn't know that this was exactly what Qin Feiyang wanted. Little brat, now is the time. Cooperate with me and break the seal in one fell swoop. Qin Feiyang secretly shouted. Understood. The little boy replied. With a wave of his small hand, all of his divine power and battle chi instantly gathered in the sky above the Devil's Land. At the same time, Qin Feiyang stared at the Dragon Prince and the divine power of over 10,000 dragons, his eyes filled with determination. This time he must break the ancient castle's seal. In the blink of an eye, rumble. The ice dragon's sacred sword was the first to attack. Qin Feiyang saw the opportunity and directly used his glabella to meet it. A world-destroying aura instantly spread out. Following closely behind, the divine power of over 10,000 dragons also arrived, and destructive fluctuations spread out in all directions. Now, Qin Feiyang roared, gritting his teeth as he used all of his strength to resist the ice dragon's sacred sword and meet the divine power. With a loud bang, the divine power also fiercely struck his glabella. At the same time, inside the black tortoise world, the little boy's eyes were like torches as he suddenly pressed his small hand down. The roaring divine power and battle chi in the sky instantly turned into a pillar of light that shot into the ancient castle. Clang! The ancient castle immediately trembled as a monstrous divine power surged out. The divine light that shot out was even more dazzling than the scorching sun. The next moment, 12 figures appeared outside the ancient castle. It was Wang Chong, the old woman, and the others. The moment these people appeared, the ancient castle suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Where's the ancient castle? Everyone was bewildered. The seal of the ancient castle has been broken. They went out to help. The little boy was abnormally excited. He looked at Wang Chong and the others and shouted, "You'd better behave yourselves. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." After saying that, he raised his head to look at the image in the sky. Outside. At the same time the ancient castle disappeared, the space between Qin Feiyang's eyebrows once again exploded with a loud, muffled sound. It was the sound of the seal being broken. "Come out, castle!" Qin Feiyang roared. The next moment, a black light shot out from between Qin Feiyang's brows and instantly struck towards the Ice Dragon Holy Sword. With a loud clang, the Ice Dragon Holy Sword was actually sent flying on the spot. The Ice Dragon's soul was stunned. Long Zun and the others were also stunned. What was going on? I've finally broken the seal. A smile finally appeared on Qin Feiyang's face. He waved his hand, and the black light made a turn in the air. Then, it returned in front of him, and revealed its true form. If it wasn't the castle, then who could it be? That's it. The eyes of Dragon Sovereign and the other ancestral dragons trembled. They all had a deep impression of the ancient castle. Back in the North Sea Star River, it was this castle that single-handedly crushed all the heaven-defying divine artifacts and forced them to flee in panic. After so many years, the ancient castle appeared once again. I want to thank you all for helping me break the seal of the ancient castle. Qin Feiyang looked at the Dragon Prince, Dragon Sovereign, and the others and smiled. What? Dragon Sovereign's eyes trembled. Yes. I did that just now to break the seal of the ancient castle, because ever since the battle in the North Sea, the ancient castle has been sealed by the small beast. You might not know that golden small beast, but the ice dragon knows it. I heard that it's the companion of the god of creation. However, the greatest credit for being able to break the seal is the living beings of the black tortoise world. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to do it. When I opened the slaughter domain, it was them who helped me. Now when I broke the seal, it was also them who helped me. They are my Qin Feiyang's backing. And I, Qin Feiyang, will forever protect them. Qin Feiyang smiled. These words were not only said to Dragon Sovereign and the others, but also to all the living beings of the Black Tortoise world. This was his Qin Feiyang's promise. Did you hear that? The Lord Ruler said that he will always protect us. Everything we did was worth it. The living beings of the Black Tortoise world were extremely moved when they heard Qin Feiyang's words. Actually, although many things had been endorsed by Pai Lupi and Theta Wang over the years, everyone knew in their hearts that behind the two of them was Qin Feiyang. Whether it was the spirit vein, the crystal vein, or the herbs, they were all selflessly given to them by Qin Feiyang. They could be where they were today because of Qin Feiyang. So, they had always been grateful to Qin Feiyang. They were also glad that they could meet such a good ruler. However, when Dragon Sovereign and the others heard these words, they were furious. Originally, they wanted to kill Qin Feiyang, but they didn't expect that they would end up helping Qin Feiyang instead. The ancient castle broke the seal. This ancient castle's strength had already surpassed the ruler's divine weapon back then. What about now? Wouldn't it be even stronger? Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze and looked at the ancient castle. All these years I've wronged you. The ancient castle buzzed, which could be considered as a response to Qin Feiyang. I really blame myself. You and Chang Shui have always been by my side, protecting me. But what about me? Chang Shui was snatched away by that damn small beast. I couldn't do anything. You were sealed by that small beast, and I could only watch helplessly. I'm really sorry, but I believe that sooner or later, I will definitely defeat small beast. Now let's work together and get rid of these obstacles in front of us first. Qin Feiyang roared. That's right. In his eyes, the dragons were just an obstacle to him finding small beast for revenge. Clang. As soon as Qin Feiyang finished speaking, the ancient castle shook violently, and a shocking aura rolled out. This aura had already reached the level of a ruler's divine weapon. Looking at the ancient castle at this moment, Qin Feiyang was wild with joy. It had finally evolved into a ruler's divine weapon. Impossible. Dragon Sovereign and the 10 ancestor dragons were shocked. You don't know, right? The ancient castle has already merged with the Black Tortoise realm. It's growing every moment. The ruler's divine weapon is just the beginning. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the ancient castle immediately grew in size. In an instant, it became a giant fortress that was hundreds of feet tall, and charged toward the Ice Dragon's sacred sword. Ruler's divine weapon. The Ice Dragon's soul stared at the ancient castle and roared fiercely. I really underestimated your strength. He grabbed the Ice Dragon's sacred sword and charged toward the ancient castle. Clang. The two rulers' divine weapons collided violently. Heaven and earth roared. However, even if the two rulers' divine weapons collided, it couldn't shake the heavenly prison. Above the heavenly prison, Lin Yi looked at the ancient castle with a smile in her eyes. The sloppy old man also had a look of emotion. This young man is really full of miracles. But Dragon Sovereign and the others suddenly changed their expressions. Now there was no Ice Dragon's barrier, no ruler's realm, and no ruler's divine weapons protection. The confrontation between the ancient castle and the Ice Dragon's sacred sword was enough to destroy them instantly. Therefore, the group of people immediately turned around and flew away without looking back. The Ice Dragon's soul was different from Qin Feiyang. One was protected by the ancient castle, and the other was protected by the Ice Dragon's sacred sword, so they wouldn't be hurt. So what if you have a ruler's divine weapon? You will never be able to make up for the gap in cultivation. The Ice Dragon's soul roared, and divine power roared out as it rushed toward Qin Feiyang. But before it could get close to Qin Feiyang, it was shattered by the ancient castle's divine power. The Ice Dragon's soul was furious. It stared at Qin Feiyang and roared, "If you have the guts, let's go to the north and fight." He could tell that only by killing Qin Feiyang would the curtains of this battle be drawn to an end. Why not? Qin Feiyang said coldly. He also intended to quickly finish off the dragon's prince. He then looked up at the ancient castle and said, "I will leave this place to you." After saying that, he turned around and used the walk formula to rush toward the north. The Ice Dragon's soul's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and it followed closely behind. They couldn't intervene in the battle between the ancient castle and the Ice Dragon's sacred sword, so they let the two rulers' divine weapons fight in the inner sea. Their battlefield naturally couldn't be in the inner sea, because if it was in the inner sea, the ancient castle and the Ice Dragon's sacred sword would have to be distracted to protect them, and they couldn't exert their full strength. Chapter 2935. North. Qin Feiyang and the Ice Dragon's soul flew out of the inner sea and entered the Dragon God mountain range. This place was still submerged by the fluctuations of the sovereign weapon. Fortunately, Qin Feiyang's body was always protected by a layer of black light. This was the castle protecting him. There was also a white light on the body of the Prince of Dragons. This was also the protective layer given to him by the Ice Dragon's sacred sword. Clang. As soon as he left the inner sea, the Prince of Dragons waved his hand, and the second profound ability of the Law of Light, the Sword of Judgment, appeared and slashed at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang didn't pay any attention to him. He executed the walk character formula and flew away like a bolt of lightning. Because of the protection of the black light, even if the Sword of Judgment hit him, it would not cause any harm to him. At the same time, if he attacked, he would not be able to cause any harm to the Prince of Dragons. So, he had to wait until he was far enough away from the inner sea, and the protective layer was removed before the real battle could begin. As expected, the Sword of Judgment hit Qin Feiyang's body, but it was like scratching an itch. Humph. I'll let you live a little longer. The Prince of Dragons snorted, holding the Sword of Judgment, and followed Qin Feiyang. After an unknown amount of time, finally, the protective layer on the two began to disintegrate. At this point, although they could still sense the aura of the castle and the Ice Dragon's sacred sword, the fluctuations were no longer a threat to them. Another dozen breaths passed. The protective layer on their bodies had finally completely disintegrated. This was naturally the doing of the castle and the Ice Dragon's sacred sword. They could sense the distance between Qin Feiyang and the Prince of Dragons, and when the two reached a safe distance, the protective layer would be disintegrated. Without the protective layer, it meant that the battle between the two had officially begun. Clang! The Ice Dragon's soul immediately raised the Sword of Judgment and attacked Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang also immediately turned around, and with a terrifying killing intent, the blood-red sword appeared in his hand. The slaughter domain had a time limit, but the kill formula did not. Clang! In an instant, the blood-red sword and the Sword of Judgment collided. Even without the slaughter domain, the blood-red sword was still an extremely powerful existence. But, because of the difference in cultivation, Qin Feiyang was unable to compete with the Ice Dragon's soul. This was because not only was the Ice Dragon's soul's cultivation higher than his, but the Judgment Sword was also the power of law. Therefore, on the whole, the Ice Dragon's soul had a crushing power. Crack! The blood-colored sword shattered. Like a meteor, Qin Feiyang flew out horizontally and smashed into the ground. A huge crater suddenly appeared on the ground there. What a piece of trash. To think that Sky Dragon admires you so much. You're even worse than a madman. The soul of the Ice Dragon shook its head, its face full of mockery. The Judgment Sword exuded a sharp light that could destroy the world. Now this prince will send you to hell. The Sword of Judgment immediately flew out of his hand and attacked Qin Feiyang in the deep pit. There were too many people who wanted to send me to hell, but in the end, I was the one who sent them to hell. Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up and activated the Rising Dragon art. His cultivation instantly soared to the small success imperishable stage. Following closely, a dragon soul roared out. Ding! The Eye of Heaven directly opened. The soul of the Ice Dragon sneered. The Eye of Heaven is indeed heaven-defying, but it doesn't seem to be able to replicate the power of law. How would you know if you haven't tried? Qin Feiyang snorted. The Eye of Heaven exuded a mysterious aura and shrouded the Judgment Sword. In the end, it really couldn't replicate it. This, Qin Feiyang was stunned. Haha. It seems that the Eye of Heaven is not that heaven-defying. Go to hell. The soul of the Ice Dragon laughed. The Judgment Sword tore through all directions and slashed towards Qin Feiyang's head. In a hurry, Qin Feiyang opened the Sword of Light and faced the Judgment Sword. Not bad. In such a short time, you have actually comprehended the first profound divine ability. With your comprehension and potential, it won't be long before the Law of Light can be on par with this prince. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. The soul of the Ice Dragon's eyes revealed a cruel look. Crack! The Judgment Sword fell, and the Sword of Light in Qin Feiyang's hand instantly shattered. Not only the gap in cultivation, but also the gap in the power of law. Now, Qin Feiyang's cultivation was at the minor undead realm, while the soul of the Ice Dragon's cultivation was at the perfection undead realm. Qin Feiyang's Law of Light was only the first profound divine ability, while the soul of the Ice Dragons was the second profound divine ability. So, the gap between them was not small, it was like being separated by a few mountains. The Judgment Sword shattered the Sword of Light, and went straight towards Qin Feiyang. In the nick of time, Qin Feiyang activated the battle secret art. Clang! The Judgment Sword immediately blasted on the battle armor. The 90% damage immunity of the battle secret art was not a joke. This sword was forcibly blocked. Although it was blocked, Qin Feiyang also spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out. Battle secret art? The soul of the Ice Dragon murmured. This kid might really not be underestimated, because he had more than one kind of heaven-defying divine weapon. I have to get rid of him quickly. The soul of the Ice Dragon secretly muttered. The Judgment Sword once again charged towards Qin Feiyang with the power to destroy the world. Qin Feiyang stabilized himself in the air and activated the Eye of Heaven again. It has been proven that you can't replicate the power of law. Why do you still activate the Eye of Heaven? Are you at your wit's end? The soul of the ice dragon sneered. Although the power of law can't be replicated, your ice dragon domain can. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. Boom. At that moment, his cultivation soared again. Great undead realm, perfection undead realm. What? The soul of the ice dragon was stunned. Didn't this person already activate the rising dragon technique? How could he replicate the ice dragon domain? One had to know. Normally, this kind of divine ability couldn't be stacked. This Eye of Heaven was really heaven-defying. It forcefully stacked this person's cultivation to the perfection undead realm. In other words, now Qin Feiyang's cultivation was the same as his. The only difference was in the power of law. Clang. The sword of light appeared again, and faced the judgment sword. Crack. Without any suspense, the sword of light instantly shattered, and the judgment sword once again hit Qin Feiyang's body. But this time, because their cultivation was at the same level, plus the 90% damage immunity of the battle formula, the judgment sword didn't cause too much damage to him. This is the battle formula? Isn't this defensive power too terrifying? The soul of the ice dragon was also shocked. Of course it's terrifying. Because of the 90% damage immunity. Qin Feiyang said. What? 90% damage immunity? The soul of the ice dragon was stunned. Knowing this number, its heart suddenly surged. I have more or less understood your strength. The real battle begins now. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the blood-red longsword condensed once again. Its sharpness could topple mountains and overturn seas. I don't believe that without the slaughter zone, your battle formula can be compared to the power of law. The soul of the ice dragon roared and the judgment sword tore the sky and earth apart. Never underestimate the battle formula. Qin Feiyang whispered, grabbed the blood-red sword and faced the judgment sword. Clang. In an instant, the blood-red sword and the judgment sword collided again. Crack. Immediately, there was a loud explosion. Haha. The battle formula is just like this? The soul of the ice dragon laughed. But in the next moment, the smile on its face froze. Because it was shocked to find that it wasn't the blood-red sword that was broken, but the judgment sword. How is this possible? Looking at the judgment sword that was broken into pieces, its eyes opened wide in anger. I said, don't underestimate the battle formula. Qin Feiyang said expressionlessly and took the initiative to attack the soul of the ice dragon. Why are you so arrogant? The third profound super ability, Holy Sword of Light, crush it for me. Suddenly, the ice dragon's soul let out a roar, seemingly angry out of humiliation. Clang. The Holy Sword of Light appeared, its destructive aura shattered in all directions. Accompanied by a loud bang, the blood-red sword and the Holy Sword of Light collided. The two were evenly matched. How is this possible? The soul of the ice dragon was in disbelief at this result. One must know. This was the third profound super ability. The battle formula was actually this powerful? In the case of the same cultivation, I have never been afraid of anyone. Qin Feiyang held the blood-colored longsword in his hand. Like a fiend god descending to the mortal world, he slashed out sword after sword. Terrifying sword chi destroyed everything in all directions. I don't believe it. The soul of the ice dragon was also crazily slashing out with the Holy Sword of Light, colliding with the blood-red sword. One was formed by a heaven-defying divine art. The other was formed by the power of law. The two were like real divine weapons, creating dazzling sparks when they collided. Millions of miles had been razed to the ground. The terrifying destructive waves rolled in all directions. The more the soul of the ice dragon fought, the more shocked it became. The battle formula, the kill formula, the Eye of Heaven. How could a mere human master so many heaven-defying techniques? I remember you said. You and the Sky Dragon's divine art can't be shared. The Sky Dragon's soul's god-slaying formula, you shouldn't be able to activate it either. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. So what if I am? The soul of the ice dragon said angrily. I don't want to do anything. I'm just saying that the battle has been decided. Even if you can activate the god-slaying formula, You're still not my match. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and disappeared in front of the soul of the ice dragon. The movement formula. That's right. In the case of the same cultivation, he had the absolute strength to crush it. For example, the movement formula. As a heaven-defying divine art, its speed was many times faster than a supreme-level auxiliary divine art. On the other hand, the Prince of the Dragon's god-slaying formula was only a heaven-defying slaughter divine art. It didn't have the ability to increase speed. So as long as their cultivation was the same, after activating the movement formula, the Prince of the Dragons wouldn't be able to keep up with his speed. As everyone knew, in a battle between experts, speed was also the key to victory. If one side's speed was faster than the other, there was no suspense in the battle. Where is he? As expected, after Qin Feiyang activated the movement formula, the soul of the ice dragon panicked and looked around, trying to find any trace of Qin Feiyang. Can you keep up with my speed? Qin Feiyang suddenly appeared on the left side of the soul of the ice dragon and attacked with his blood-colored sword. The soul of the ice dragon's expression changed and hurriedly grabbed the Holy Radiance sword to meet the attack. Clang! The two divine weapons clashed, causing the sky to lose its color. Your advantage is gone, but you'll never be able to fill up my advantage. Qin Feiyang slammed his palm on the soul of the ice dragon's chest. Poof! The soul of the ice dragon spat out a mouthful of blood and crashed into the ground like a meteor. This is my advantage, my physical body and strength. Against my supreme-level physical body, what do you have to contend with me? After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, the blood-colored longsword flew out of his hand. Its sharpness tore the heavens and split the earth as it flew straight towards the soul of the ice dragon below. Chapter 2936. I can't even defeat him. The ice dragon's soul got up and looked at the blood-red sword coming at it. It couldn't help but go crazy. Before, frenzy's petrification almost wiped out all the dragons. Now, Qin Feiyang relied on the Eye of Heaven to turn the situation around. Why were these people's battle souls so heaven-defying? If Qin Feiyang's cultivation was still at the minor achievement imperishable realm, then even if he had the kill symbol art, even if Qin Feiyang's physical body had reached the level of a supreme being, he still wouldn't be a match for him. I can't accept this, I can't accept this. The ice dragon's soul roared and the holy light sword rushed into the sky, crazily attacking the blood-red sword. Crack! With a loud sound, the blood-red sword and the holy light sword shattered at the same time. Destructive waves of air surged in all directions, destroying everything. Have you run out of tricks? Qin Feiyang looked down at the ice dragon's soul. Hearing this, the ice dragon's soul suddenly felt a great sense of humiliation. That was because he had said those words to Qin Feiyang before. How long had it been? Now Qin Feiyang returned it to it without missing a word. Die. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded. A terrifying and monstrous divine power rolled over from afar, and its aura firmly locked onto Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang suddenly raised his head and looked at the divine power. This was the power of the Sky Dragon. And the aura was very familiar. It was the divine power of the Dragon Sovereign. The Great Dragon Sovereign actually sneak attacked a junior. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Qin Feiyang immediately waved his hand, and the blood-red sword condensed and slashed out. Now he had the cultivation of the perfect undead stage. Although the Dragon Sovereign's cultivation was at the perfect undead stage, Qin Feiyang still had the kill symbol art. The blood-red sword shattered the sword and directly crushed the divine power. Let's attack together and kill him. The Dragon Sovereign's roar sounded. Then, a group of people came from the horizon in a grandiose manner. They were the supreme experts of the dragons. They had followed the fluctuations of the battle between Qin Feiyang and the Ice Dragon Soul. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was alone, he wanted to kill Qin Feiyang. Because Qin Feiyang was the real core figure. Only by getting rid of Qin Feiyang would the human side be like a group of dragons without a leader. Only then could this battle be settled. Boom. Following Longzuan's words, the progenitor dragons and the experts immediately unleashed their god force and surged at Qin Feiyang like a raging wave. In order to deal with me, so many people are attacking together. They really think highly of me. However, you're not the only ones who have it. I have it too. Qin Feiyang bellowed. With a thought, a dense crowd of people appeared in the void behind him. They were led by Yi Zhong, Qin Batian, Lu Xingyang, Supreme Cloud, and Supreme Beast. Next were the Rain Emperor and Ice Emperor. Behind them were the 108 generals. And it wasn't just them. Wang Ming and Yang Li were also standing beside the Rain Emperor and Ice Emperor. Both of them were now at the great achievement Eternal Realm. There were also the 6 people including the Straw Sandal Old Man, Li Chang, and so on. And behind them, there were more than 10,000 half-step Eternal Realm Supreme Experts. They were all from the Dragon Slayer Palace. During the years of recuperation in the Black Tortoise world, many of the people from the Dragon Slayer Palace who were originally at the Great Achievement 9th Heaven Realm had stepped into the half-step Eternal Realm. In other words, now Qin Feiyang's strength was no weaker than the dragon's. Dragon Sovereign, don't be stubborn. Yi Zhong shouted. Boom. His aura surged out, and his god force roared in all directions. If you bow down and surrender, we can consider sparing your dragon race a way out. Qin Batian and the others also released their auras. The Dragon Sovereign said angrily. A bunch of ants, how dare you challenge me? Ants? Who is the ant now? Li Chang stood beside a group of god generals with a sneer on his face. You traitor, I'll kill you sooner or later. The Dragon Sovereign shouted. What nonsense are you talking about? Let's fight. Madman landed beside Qin Feiyang with a step, his aura like a rainbow. Seeing Madman stand out, the pupils of the dragons and the others immediately shrank. The scene of being petrified had long been imprinted in their hearts, and they would probably never forget it. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Madman alone was enough to destroy all of the dragons. However, for some reason, Madman didn't open his blood eye this time. In the blink of an eye, the divine force of the dragons and the others had already charged over. Then let's fight to the death. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the blood-colored longsword slashed out with a monstrous sharpness. Boom. Madman, Yi Zhong and the others, as well as all the half-step Immortal Realm experts of the Dragon Slayer Palace, also attacked. Divine force roared, converging into a huge wave, and followed the blood-colored sky, crazily attacking. Boom. Crack. In an instant, the blood-colored longsword and the divine force of the dragons collided, and the world trembled. Following closely, the divine force of Madman and the others also arrived. This was the first head-on confrontation between humans and dragons in the truest sense. The earth collapsed, and the void shattered. Even the sky was shattering. Destructive fluctuations spread tens of millions of miles away. Half of the northern part was almost razed to the ground. This was a disaster. Fortunately, the living beings of the divine land had already moved. Otherwise it would have been a scene of misery and suffering. Now we can't avoid it anymore. Kill for me. The Dragon Sovereign roared. Kill. The tens of thousands of Dragon Clan members immediately let out thunderous battle cries as they charged towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang turned to look at everyone behind him and said with a smile. As the Dragon Sovereign said, I will avoid this battle and try to save my life as much as possible. Yes. Everyone nodded in unison. Then, Qin Feiyang turned to look at the Dragon Sovereign and the others, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He waved his hand and said, Kill. Kill. At that moment, everyone roared and charged toward the dragons. Those ancestral dragons, I have long found them an eyesore. All of you stand aside, I will kill them. The Beast Sovereign took a step forward and charged toward the ancestral dragons. But at the same time, the Dragon Sovereign took a step forward and stood in front of the Beast Sovereign, saying, How dare you speak so arrogantly with your little cultivation base? After saying that, she struck out like lightning and slapped the Beast Sovereign's chest. The Beast Sovereign's pupils shrank and he hurriedly dodged. But his speed was much slower than the Dragon Sovereign's, and he was immediately sent flying, his blood boiling with anger. Qin Feiyang looked at the Beast Sovereign, then at Yi Zhong, Qin Batian, Lu Xingyang and Supreme Cloud. The Dragon Sovereign is too strong, please. We will try our best. They took a deep breath and took a step forward at the same time, landing beside the Beast Sovereign. The Dragon Sovereign hasn't been dealt with yet, and you want to kill the ancestral dragons? I think you are too arrogant. Supreme Cloud glared at the Beast Sovereign. Cut the crap, attack. The Beast Sovereign shouted. Boom. The 5 people's auras erupted, and they joined forces to attack the dragons. 5 perfected imperishable realm cultivators can't change the situation. The Dragon Sovereign snorted and displayed terrifying strength, and the dragon aura rolled out and directly sent the 5 people flying. They are indeed very strong. Qin Feiyang's eyes darkened. Now, the Sunset Divine Bow and other heaven-defying divine weapons were severely damaged by the Ice Dragon's sacred sword, and could no longer participate in the battle, so they had to rely on themselves. And the Dragon Sovereign was undoubtedly the most difficult person to deal with. The others' battles also began one after another. Wang Ming, Yang Li, Ice Emperor, and Rain Emperor joined forces to attack the 10 ancestral dragons. Their cultivation bases were the same, and they were at a disadvantage when 4 against 10. However, Wang Ming and the others were not afraid. On the contrary, they were very proud, because in the past, they could only run away when facing the ancestral dragons. After all, they were only at the initial imperishable realm. But now, they had caught up to the various ancestral dragons, and were truly competing with them. So, even if it was 4 against 10, they were still full of fighting spirit. Boom. Crack. The battlefield gradually spread to the entire north. This was because Yizhong, Dragon Sovereign, and the others were too powerful. They were like half-step undying experts and initial undying experts. Even the fluctuations of the battle were enough to kill them. So, whether it was the Dragon Slayer Palace or the ancestral dragons, they consciously moved the battlefield elsewhere, away from the Dragon Sovereign, Yizhong, and the others. Qin Feiyang looked around the battlefield and said in a low voice, "Senior brother Lunatic, I'll leave the dragons to you for the time being." "Leave it to me?" Lunatic was slightly stunned and asked suspiciously, "Then what are you going to do?" "Master and the others are facing the Dragon Sovereign, and Yang Li and the others are facing the 10 ancestral dragons. It's too difficult, so we still need help," Qin Feiyang said. "Help?" Lunatic frowned. Suddenly, the figures of Wang Chang and the others appeared in his mind, and he immediately said, "You mean, Shu?" Qin Feiyang made a shushing gesture. He couldn't say the situation of Wang Chang and the others now, otherwise, if the Dragon Sovereign found out, he would definitely erase their divine souls immediately. Similarly, as long as he helped Wang Chang and the others get rid of the fate contract, they could come out to help without any worries. But the premise was that they had to save the other human supreme experts first. But Lunatic hesitated. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Without the Blood Eye, I can't beat him." Lunatic transmitted his voice. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Lunatic sighed. "The Blood Eye is the same as your slaughter domain. It can only be opened once a day, and it can only last for an hour each time." Qin Feiyang looked at Lunatic in shock. But thinking about it, such a heaven-defying ability should indeed have a time limit, otherwise, who could be Lunatic's opponent? Qin Feiyang said. "Then try to stall him, I will try to hurry up." "Okay." Lunatic nodded. Qin Feiyang immediately activated the concealment art and disappeared without a trace. "Where do you think you are going?" The Ice Dragon's soul rushed over murderously. "Your opponent is me." Lunatic smiled coldly and stepped forward. "Get lost." The Ice Dragon's soul shouted. "That depends on whether you have the strength or not." Lunatic activated the Blood Demon technique, and his cultivation instantly soared to the Greater Mastery Undead stage. "You think I didn't hear your previous voice transmission? Your Blood Eye can only be opened once a day. Without the Blood Eye, what can you use to fight me?" "Fine, I will kill you first, then I will kill Qin Feiyang." The Ice Dragon's soul smiled ferociously, and the Holy Light Sword appeared and slashed at Lunatic. "What? The Blood Eye can only be opened once a day." In the distant battlefield, the ancestral dragons, revered dragons, and the tens of thousands of dragons were first stunned when they heard the voice of the Ice Dragon's soul, and then they were overjoyed. The threat of the Blood Eye was obvious, and it was a thorn in their hearts. Even though they had not fought Lunatic, they had to be on guard against Lunatic's sudden attack. And now, hearing this, they were undoubtedly relieved. Without the blood eye, you think I am meat on the chopping block? Lunatic was also angry. How dare you look down on me? Golden light burst out, and the sky halberd appeared. He grabbed the sky halberd and fearlessly charged forward. Boom! Clang! The battle began. Lunatic was no match for the holy light sword, the third profound art, and the ice dragon's soul that was one stage higher than him. After a few clashes, he was covered in wounds and his life was in danger. Chapter 2937. At this moment, Qin Feiyang also avoided the battlefield of Longzun and the ancestral dragons, silently flying into the distance. Dragons and humans were easy to distinguish, especially when fighting. When dragons fought, the dragon might they emitted was very obvious. On the other hand, if there was no dragon might, it meant that this person was a human. Qin Feiyang swept his gaze over the battlefield and sent a voice transmission. Little wimp, where are Wang Chang and the others? Before the castle went out, I sent them out. They are all in the Black Tortoise realm now. But don't worry, I've been watching them. The little boy said. Qin Feiyang said, call them to your side. Okay. The little boy replied and waved his hand. Wang Chang and the others, who were standing in the medicine field below, immediately appeared beside the little boy. Elder Wang, how many human supreme experts are there in the dragons? Qin Feiyang's voice immediately sounded in the void. A total of more than 1,100 people. Wang Chang replied. Now that Qin Feiyang was far away from Longzun and the Dragon Prince, he was not afraid of the sound transmission. So many? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yes. Back then, there were many geniuses among the million people who entered the Divine Dragon Island with you. So after all these years, under the nurturing of the dragons, they have all stepped into the half-step invincible realm. Wang Chang said. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he immediately frowned and said to himself, I don't want to help these people. Why? Wang Chang was puzzled. Back then, in the Dragon God Palace, I had already given them a chance. It was they who wanted to continue following the dragons. Qin Feiyang said. Wang Chang sighed and said, this old man has also heard of these things. I can understand. So now, I only help those human supreme experts. That is people like you and Li Chang. Qin Feiyang said. All right. Wang Chang replied. If it were him, he would have done the same as Qin Feiyang. Back in the Dragon God Palace, Qin Feiyang and the others had already crushed the Divine Stone of Fate and returned their freedom. It was their own fault for not cherishing it, so these people were not worth helping. Even if he died on the battlefield, he deserved to die. Qin Feiyang said. Then all of you should carefully observe the images in the void. As long as you see any of the strongest human beings in the past, tell me immediately. All right. Wang Chang nodded. During the conversation, Qin Feiyang passed by a battlefield. It was a battle between two powerhouses who had just entered the imperishable realm. One of the dragons was a middle-aged man. The other party was naturally a member of the dragon-slaying palace, who was also a middle-aged man. As for the middle-aged man, he did not have any dragon's aura. He was clearly a human. There's no need to differentiate between humans who have just reached the imperishable realm. Because among those million people, not a single one has reached the initial imperishable level. Wang Chang's voice rang. Understood. Qin Feiyang nodded, silently approached that person, and then forcibly sent that person to the Black Tortoise realm. With his current cultivation, even if he was close to the battlefield, the concealment technique would not be broken. Now, although he had closed the Eye of Heaven and lost the superposition of the Ice Dragon domain, the Rising Dragon technique was still active. Therefore, he still maintained the cultivation of the initial imperishable realm. And these two people were both at the initial imperishable realm. Their cultivation was weaker than his, so the fluctuations from their battle naturally could not break the concealment technique. However, the middle-aged man from the dragon-slaying palace was surprised when he saw his opponent suddenly disappear. It's me. Don't make a fuss. Continue to help others. Qin Feiyang secretly said something to that person. Then, using the walk character formula, he rushed to the next battlefield like lightning. Young master? What's going on? The middle-aged man was stunned. He was naturally able to recognize Qin Feiyang's voice. However, Qin Feiyang's actions caused him to be somewhat baffled. At the same time, Black Tortoise World. The middle-aged man from the dragons also appeared beside Wang Chang, the old woman, and the others. The burly man was bewildered. "Stay here," Wang Chang said. This voice. The man immediately looked at Wang Chang and the others and said in surprise, "Old Wang, didn't you go to the 4 regions separately? Why are you still together? And here, what is this place?" "This is the Black Tortoise World," Wang Chang said. "What? The Black Tortoise World?" The big man suddenly turned pale with fright and looked around in bewilderment. This was the Black Tortoise World? Wait. Why were Wang Chang and the others in the Black Tortoise World? Could it be? Yes, we have already joined Qin Feiyang. Also, Qin Feiyang sent you to the Black Tortoise World to save you, Wang Chang said. He defected to Qin Feiyang. The man's eyes trembled. Even we understand. Do you still want to work for the dragons? The old woman frowned. No. The man hurriedly shouted. That's enough. The old woman smiled slightly. The middle-aged man frowned and said, But why did Qin Feiyang help me? Because we don't want to give up on you, Wang Chang said. The middle-aged man looked at Wang Chang in a daze and then bowed. Thank you, old Wang. It's fine. Wang Chang waved his hand and looked at the scene in the void. Longzuan and the other ancestral dragons were fighting with Yizhong and the others. The battlefield was completely scattered. Therefore, even if the dragon's supreme human experts were sent to the Black Tortoise World by Qin Feiyang, they would not know. Under Wang Chang's guidance, more than 200 people were sent to the Black Tortoise World by Qin Feiyang in a few hundred breaths. Soon, Qin Feiyang rushed to another battlefield. It was a battle between 2 half-step undying experts. Of the 2 fighting here, one was naturally from the dragon-slaying palace, and the other was from the dragons. Qin Feiyang was quite unfamiliar with the person from the dragon-slaying palace. But when Qin Feiyang saw the person from the dragons, he was a little stunned. It was actually the purple-clothed young man he met in the cultivation place. It was the person who looked very gentle and harmless, but chose the cave abode at the top of the mountain. At that time, Qin Feiyang was still guessing that this person might be a hypocrite, and Li Xiaofei even scolded this person at that time. He didn't expect that this person had already stepped into the half-step undying realm. It seemed that he really had some skills. The purple-clothed young man and the person from the dragon-slaying palace were evenly matched. Qin Feiyang was about to take action and kill the purple-clothed young man. But suddenly, he turned his head and saw a black-clothed young man flying over. Huh. Qin Feiyang was stunned. It was actually another acquaintance. And he was even more familiar than the purple-clothed young man. It was Li Xiaofei. This guy is also here? Qin Feiyang frowned. He took a closer look and found that Li Xiaofei had also stepped into the half-step undying realm. Why didn't he see that this guy was so talented back then? Li Xiaofei, come and help me. The purple-clothed young man also saw Li Xiaofei and hurriedly shouted with joy. The person from the dragon-slaying palace suddenly became nervous. I'm here to help you. Li Xiaofei landed on the purple-clothed young man and said with a smile. The purple-clothed young man nodded and looked at the person from the dragon-slaying palace. He sneered and said, Then let's join hands and kill him. Okay. Li Xiaofei nodded. Boom. The 2 of them rushed toward the person from the dragon-slaying palace. You're really good at being a lackey. Qin Feiyang shook his head and was about to kill Li Xiaofei as well. But suddenly, Li Xiaofei, who was rushing toward the person from the dragon-slaying palace, suddenly turned around and slapped the purple-clothed young man's lower abdomen, shattering his energy sea on the spot. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He actually sneak-attacked the purple-clothed young man? The person from the dragon-slaying palace also looked at Li Xiaofei in shock. What are you doing? The purple-clothed young man stared at Li Xiaofei in disbelief. What am I doing? Shouldn't someone like you, who is willing to be a lackey of the dragons, be killed? Li Xiaofei's face was full of disgust. He stepped forward and punched the purple-clothed young man's head. Qin Feiyang and the person from the dragon-slaying palace looked at this scene in shock. Don't be afraid. I'm on your side. Li Xiaofei looked at the person from the dragon-slaying palace and said with a smile. On our side? The person from the dragon-slaying palace was stunned. Yes. Li Xiaofei nodded and said, I'm Li Xiaofei, the disciple of Sunlight Emperor. Sunlight Emperor's disciple? The person from the dragon-slaying palace was stunned. Qin Feiyang also looked at Li Xiaofei in shock. Sunlight Emperor was his ancestor Lu Zhengyang. Li Xiaofei was actually his ancestor's disciple? I know that you definitely haven't heard of my name because my identity has always been kept a secret. And I used to be the young lord of the south. I sneaked into the Divine Dragon Island under my master's order. This is my identity token. Li Xiaofei looked at the person from the dragon-slaying palace, and then took out a token. The person from the dragon-slaying palace carefully checked the token, and then quickly bowed and said, Greetings, young lord. Really? Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes. Li Xiaofei nodded to the person from the dragon-slaying palace and put away the token. He glanced at the void and said with a grin, Qin Feiyang, don't hide. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He knew that he was here? The person from the dragon-slaying palace also glanced at the void in surprise. Are you surprised? Li Xiaofei looked at the void where Qin Feiyang was and asked with a smile. Quite surprised. Qin Feiyang's voice sounded in the void. It's really Qin Feiyang. The person from the dragon-slaying palace was shocked and then hurriedly bowed and said, Greetings, young lord. Don't be so polite and don't make a fuss. I have something important to do now. I can't expose my whereabouts. Qin Feiyang said. Yes. The person from the dragon-slaying palace bowed and replied. Li Xiaofei, how did you know I was here? Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously. 6 cents. Li Xiaofei laughed. 6 cents? Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes. Back in the cultivation place, I told you that my 6 cents is very accurate. You didn't believe me and even treated me as a fraud. Li Xiaofei pursed his lips. Qin Feiyang's face twitched. 6 cents? Only a fool would believe you. Li Xiaofei said, We'll talk about this later. Help me undo the fate contract. Not now. Why don't you go to the Black Tortoise world first? Qin Feiyang said. How long do I have to wait? Li Xiaofei raised his eyebrows. Very soon. Qin Feiyang said. All right then. Send me to the Black Tortoise world. Li Xiaofei said. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and Li Xiaofei disappeared. Continue to help your companions. Be careful. Qin Feiyang reminded the person from the dragon-slaying palace, and then flew away like lightning. Chapter 2938. Inside the Black Tortoise Realm. As soon as Li Xiaofei appeared, he was stunned when he saw the 200 people that Qin Feiyang had sent in. So many people? At that moment, he knew what Qin Feiyang was going to do. The old woman walked out and looked at Li Xiaofei. I really didn't expect you to be Sunlight Emperor's disciple. Li Xiaofei was stunned again. He looked at the old woman and then at Wang Chang. There was a trace of surprise on his face. Didn't they go to the 4 major regions? Why were they in the Black Tortoise Realm? Li Xiaofei asked. Have you all gone to Qin Feiyang? Yes. The old woman looked at the image in the void and nodded. When did this happen? Li Xiaofei was stunned. Not long ago. The old woman said. Not long ago. Li Xiaofei was slightly stunned. He pondered for a while and said, Did you come to Qin Feiyang immediately after you left? Yes. The old woman nodded. Li Xiaofei shook his head and laughed. Longzuan still thinks that you have sneaked into the 4 major regions. If she knows that you have been in the Black Tortoise Realm all this time, she will probably be furious. We have done too many wrong things over the years. How can we bear to hurt the creatures of the 4 major regions? The old woman shook her head and sighed. Outside, Qin Feiyang kept rushing to various battlefields. One by one, the human supreme experts were sent to the Black Tortoise Realm. At that moment, there were already more than 700 people gathered around Wang Chang and the others. Wang Chang glanced at everyone and said, Qin Feiyang, that's about it. Qin Feiyang immediately stopped in the void and scanned the battlefields around. There were also many human supreme experts fighting with the people of the Dragon Slayer Palace. But they had all entered the Divine Dragon Island with Qin Feiyang. So, Qin Feiyang had no sympathy for these people. Swoosh. In the next moment, he was in the Black Tortoise realm. The gazes of everyone present all landed on Qin Feiyang. Long story short, before the battle is over, you must be under my control, Qin Feiyang said. One of the men said, Elder Wang has already told us. We have no objections. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. His hands continued to form seals, enslavement seals appearing one after another. Do I have to be controlled by you first? Li Xiaofei asked. You are the ancestor's disciple. Would I dare to control you? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. With a wave of his hand, more than 700 slave seals instantly entered everyone's heads. Outside, Long Zun had single-handedly suppressed Yizhong's group of 5. It could be said that in front of Long Zun, Yizhong's group of 5 did not even have the slightest chance of victory. That was because Long Zun surpassed the 5 of them in both cultivation and the power of laws. Although not much time had passed, their bodies were already riddled with wounds. Do you think you can contend against me just because you've broken through to the great circle of the Undying Realm? Without any heaven-defying divine items, I alone can annihilate all of you. Long Zun was overbearing as he charged towards Yizhong. I don't really care about the Beast Emperor's betrayal, but your betrayal has made me very disappointed. I will kill you first and let you know the consequences of betraying me. But at this moment, the brave and invincible Long Zun's body suddenly trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. What's going on? Yizhong's group of 5 was shocked. Who cares what's going on? Take her life while she's sick, Cloud Sovereign shouted. The 5 of them immediately charged towards Long Zun. Scram! Long Zun roared. The aura of a peak imperishable stage expert erupted like a volcano. The 5 of them were sent flying on the spot, blood gushing out of their mouths. This is impossible. Long Zun shook his head. Nothing is impossible. Qin Feiyang's voice suddenly sounded as he appeared beside Yizhong's group of 5. What did you do? Long Zun stared at Qin Feiyang. The corners of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted. With a wave of his hand, Wang Chang and more than 700 people appeared. Wang Chang. Long Zun looked at Wang Chang and his eyes trembled. Yes, it's me. Wang Chang nodded. You actually betrayed me too. Long Zun roared. It's not betrayal, it's awakening. If this old man were to continue to follow you and bring disaster upon the world, then this old man would truly become a sinner for all eternity. Wang Chang said. Damn it, all of you deserve to die. Long Zun roared as if he had gone mad. Ah! At this moment, screams of agony rang out from the various battlefields. On a nearby battlefield, a half-step imperishable stage expert was fighting with the people of the dragon-slaying palace. But suddenly, that person let out a blood-curdling scream, then fell straight to the ground, dead. Looking at his divine soul again, it had already disappeared. At the same time, on another battlefield, 2 middle-aged burly men were fighting fiercely. One of them was from the dragon-slaying palace, and the other was naturally a human dragon race expert. This human dragon race expert had already gained the upper hand and forced the person from the dragon-slaying palace to retreat. As long as he was given a little more time, he would definitely be able to kill the person from the dragon-slaying palace. But suddenly, he also let out a scream and fell to the ground, dead on the spot. The person from the dragon-slaying palace was stunned. What was going on? Similar situations were happening in many other places. Just like these 2 people, there was no warning at all. With a single scream, they died. The others didn't know what was going on, but Qin Feiyang and the others knew very well. Looking at this scene, their faces were filled with lingering fear. As they expected, Long Zun was exasperated and wiped out the divine souls of all the human experts. Fortunately, they had saved everyone in advance. Otherwise, the people around them would have died. Even Li Xiaofei would have died. You are really ruthless. We didn't save those people, which means that we have already given up on them. Furthermore, they are loyal and devoted to your dragon clan to begin with. Yet you didn't even bother to say anything and directly killed them. Are we humans really so cheap in your eyes? Wang Chang looked at Long Zun with grief and indignation. That's right. Whether it's them, you, or even Yi Zhong, you are just a chess piece in my hands. Your lives are not as valuable as a dog. Long Zun laughed sinisterly. Bastard! Wang Chang roared and slapped at Long Zun. You overestimate yourself. Long Zun smiled disdainfully, and a surge of divine power surged toward Wang Chang. Retreat. Qin Baishan's expression changed and he hurriedly stepped in front of Wang Chang. He looked at Long Zun coldly and said, Do you really think you are invincible? Boom. A monstrous aura erupted. Qin Baishan's cultivation also stepped into the perfected indestructible realm in an instant. Following closely, Qin Batian slapped out, and Long Zun's divine power dissipated on the spot. This, Long Zun was stunned. I, Qin Batian, am not an undeserved reputation. Qin Batian looked at Long Zun coldly. This should be a divine art to increase cultivation. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Baishan's back, and his heart could not help but calm down. Previously, he was worried that no one could compete with Long Zun. Because Long Zun's cultivation was too strong, if no one restrained her, then the chances of winning this battle were really not high. But now, Qin Batian stood up. Although Qin Baishan's power of law was not as good as Long Zun's, their cultivation was about the same. With Yi Zhong, Cloud Sovereign, Beast Sovereign, and Lu Xingyang assisting from the side, there was no problem restraining Long Zun. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Chang and the others and shouted, You guys go and help. Boom. At that moment, more than 700 people erupted with a monstrous aura and disappeared in all directions, heading to the various battlefields to support. Elder Wang, go and help Yang Li and the others. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Chang and said, Okay. Wang Chang nodded, took a step forward, and rushed to the battlefield of Yang Li and the others and the 10 ancestor dragons. What about me? Li Xiaofei asked. Up to you. Qin Feiyang said without turning his head, and then glanced at the battlefield of Frenzy and the Prince of the Dragons, frowning slightly and said, Master, where is Frenzy? He and the Prince of the Dragons went over there. Yi Zhong pointed to the north. I'll go and support them now, you guys be careful. Qin Feiyang reminded, and then used the walk formula, and rushed to the north. Lu Xiaofei looked at Qin Feiyang's back, and then looked at Lu Xingyang and said, Master, where am I going? Do whatever you want, just don't embarrass me. Lu Xingyang smiled. Okay. Li Xiaofei nodded, and also disappeared from the battlefield. In the north, about 10 million miles away from the battlefield of Long Zun and Yi Zhong, there was an even more tragic battlefield. Blood prison, explode for me. That's right. This was the battlefield of Frenzy and the Prince of the Dragons. Frenzy was bathed in blood all over, and one of his arms had been shattered. What was more terrifying was that there was a fist-sized blood puppet on his chest, and blood was gushing out. There was also an insoluble weakness between his eyebrows. To be honest, under the situation where he couldn't open his blood eye, it was already very impressive that Frenzy could fight with the Ice Dragon Soul for so long. Boom. Following his roar, the blood prison exploded in the void, and a destructive wave of air swept out in all directions. An ant trying to shake a tree. The Ice Dragon Soul sneered, and the Holy Radiance Sword was invincible, and crushed the wave of air. Then, the Holy Radiance Sword's edge surged, and countless wounds appeared all over Frenzy's body. His whole body was directly blasted out, and he crashed to the ground in a sorry state. What is this Qin Feiyang doing? Why isn't he back yet? At this moment, he was quite anxious in his heart, because he was about to reach his limit. An ant will always be an ant. Now this prince will send you to the Western Paradise. The Ice Dragon Soul's face was cold, and the Holy Radiance Sword was blooming with a bright divine light, and a sword slashed towards Frenzy. Damn it! Frenzy roared in his heart. Wait. But suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Then. He took a step into the sky and laughed out loud. What are you laughing at? The Ice Dragon's soul raised its eyebrows. Frenzy said. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at myself. Laughing at yourself? Are you crazy? The ice dragon's soul was speechless. Yes. I'm really crazy to actually ignore such an important matter. I remember you said that you and the sky dragon's soul's divine art are unable to be the same. You shouldn't be able to open the sky dragon's sacred dragon domain. And this is your Achilles' heel. Frenzy's body was overflowing with killing intent, and he roared. Blood demon domain, open for me. A huge blood-red barrier suddenly appeared in the sky and enveloped the entire area. The ice dragon soul's cultivation suddenly began to plummet. Originally, the ice dragon soul was at the perfection undead stage, but as it plummeted, it fell to the perfection ninth heaven stage. Chapter 2939. The ice dragon's soul's expression froze. Although the ice dragon's soul's cultivation had plummeted, the radiant Saint Sword's aura had also plummeted. With your current perfection 9 heavens realm cultivation, even if you have the third profound divine ability, what's the use? The madman stepped forward and his aura surged towards the radiant Saint Sword. With a loud crack, the radiant Saint Sword shattered. One had to know. His cultivation was still at the Great Success Undead Realm. The Great Success Undead Realm and the Perfection 9 Heavens Realm were completely different. See, this is your weakness. I'm really stupid. I didn't think of this until now. The madman shook his head in self-mockery. Weakness? Don't you know that Sky Dragon and I can switch at any time? The Ice Dragon's soul sneered at the madman. In the next moment, the Prince of Dragons' aura changed and a sacred aura spread out. Obviously, the Ice Dragon's soul had already retreated and the Sky Dragon's soul was controlling the body. Saint Dragon's domain. The Prince of Dragons spoke in a gentle tone. As his voice fell, a barrier flashing with divine light appeared and instantly enveloped the madman. The madman's cultivation also began to plummet. Sky Dragon? The madman frowned. Yes. The Prince of Dragons nodded with a smile. You guys are really troublesome. The madman was a bit annoyed and threw a life divine pill into his mouth. Same here. The Prince of Dragons smiled. However, no matter how you switch, you won't be my match. The madman said. Because they couldn't use the same god technique, the Ice Dragon's soul's god technique also disappeared as the Sky Dragon controlled the body. This was the Ice Dragon's domain. With the Ice Dragon controlling the body, even if he was affected by the Blood Demon's domain, his cultivation could still be maintained at the Perfection 9 Heavens realm. But now, with the Ice Dragon's domain gone, the Prince of Dragons' cultivation dropped to the Perfection 9 Heavens realm. But the madman was different. Even if he was affected by the Sky Dragon's domain, he still had the Blood Demon technique. The Blood Demon technique could increase his cultivation by 3 small realms. So, even though Prince Dragons had opened the Heavenly Dragon domain, Madman's cultivation was still at the peak 9 Heavens realm. It was even stronger than the Prince of the Dragon's 9th Heaven realm. I know. The Prince of the Dragons nodded. Why are you still so calm when you know? Madman was surprised. Of course. Because I also know that without the Blood Eye and the Blood Devil Tower, it would be very difficult for you to kill me. The Prince of Dragons said. Who gave you the confidence? The madman roared, and the blood prison appeared once more. Domain of Divinity. The Prince of the Dragons waved his hand and activated his fighting soul. The blood prison immediately disappeared. Divine Art Nullification. The madman muttered and said angrily. If you have the ability, then invalidate the heaven-defying divine artifact for me. As the golden light surged, a golden halberd appeared. Madman grabbed the halberd and charged at the Prince of the Dragons. The Prince of the Dragons narrowed his eyes. He didn't dare to be careless. He waved his hand and the deity vanquishing sword appeared. Clang. He also grabbed the deity vanquishing sword and charged at the madman. The two of them once again clashed. But because of the difference in cultivation, the Prince of the Dragons was no match for him. Not long later, the Prince of the Dragons' body was also covered in wounds. So, at this time, a figure broke through the air like lightning. It was Qin Feiyang. Looking at the madman who was suppressing the Prince of the Dragons, Qin Feiyang's face was full of surprise. Didn't this guy say that he wasn't a match for the Prince of the Dragons? Why was he still suppressing the Prince of the Dragons? Wait a minute. Suddenly, he noticed the temperament of the Prince of the Dragons. This wasn't the Ice Dragon soul, but the Sky Dragon soul. Why is the Sky Dragon soul dominating the body? Isn't the Ice Dragon soul stronger? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. When he saw the madman's blood demon domain, he suddenly realized. Yes, the strength of the Ice Dragon soul was indeed strong. If it was anyone else, it would be impossible for them to be his opponent, but the madman was an exception. Because the madman controlled the blood demon domain. The blood demon domain deprived him of 5 small realms of cultivation. No matter how strong the Ice Dragon soul was, it could only be beaten up in the face of the blood demon domain. That was why he let the Sky Dragon soul come out. However, the Sky Dragon soul was not a match for the madman. Although the madman was unable to open the blood eye and the blood demon tower was heavily damaged and unable to participate in the battle, the Prince of the Dragon's Ice Dragon Holy Sword was also restrained by the ancient castle. In terms of methods, he felt that the madman was still better. But if the Sky Dragon soul and the Ice Dragon soul's divine arts could be used together, then the Prince of the Dragons would truly be invincible. Because if they were used together, the Prince of the Dragons would be able to control the Sky Dragon domain and the Ice Dragon domain at the same time. At the same time, the madman and the Prince of the Dragons also sensed Qin Feiyang's aura. The madman shouted, "There's no need for you to interfere here. I can take care of him. Go help me deal with the Dragon Sovereign." Help me deal with Mother? When the Prince of the Dragons heard the madman's words, his eyes trembled slightly, and then a trace of struggle appeared in his eyes. Qin Feiyang's strength was obvious to all. If he really went to deal with his mother, coupled with Yi Zhong and the others, then his mother's situation would be worrying. Are you sure? Qin Feiyang stopped in the air and looked at the madman. Of course. The madman said. Good. Qin Feiyang nodded. But just as Qin Feiyang turned around, the Prince of the Dragons sighed. It seems that I have to take this step. Qin Feiyang immediately looked at the Prince of the Dragons suspiciously. The Prince of the Dragons took a step back, looked at Qin Feiyang, then looked at the madman, and shook his head. You two are really a headache. Don't pretend to be mysterious. If you have any trump cards, just show them. The madman said. The Prince of the Dragons shook his head and whispered, For Mother, for the dragons, for the people, you won't object, right? It seemed like he was talking to himself, but he was actually asking the Ice Dragon's soul. Shua. As his voice fell, the Ice Dragon's soul appeared beside the Prince of the Dragons, but it kept its head down and remained silent. I know that after we fuse, one of us will disappear. But if you are willing, I choose to disappear. The Prince of the Dragons looked at the Ice Dragon's soul, and said, You. The Ice Dragon's soul suddenly raised its head and looked at the Prince of the Dragons in disbelief. Fuse? Disappear? Qin Feiyang landed beside the madman and frowned. What are they trying to do? I don't know. The madman shook his head. The Prince of the Dragons looked at the Ice Dragon's soul and smiled. I don't ask for much, as long as you help me take care of my mother and people. The Ice Dragon's soul asked, Are you really willing to sacrifice yourself to preserve my consciousness? You and I both know that whether it is Qin Feiyang or the madman, they are both powerful opponents. Just one of us can't defeat them, let alone the two of them working together. So we must fuse. Only after we fuse can we be considered complete. That's the only way we can become stronger. So I am willing to sacrifice. The Prince of the Dragons smiled. Only after we fuse can we be considered complete. Qin Feiyang murmured and pondered for a while. His eyes trembled slightly. Are they going to fuse into one? Chapter 2940. 2 into 1. Madman was shocked. If they could really merge into one, then wouldn't their divine arts be the same? In that case, the Prince of the Dragons would be powerful to an astonishing extent. Heavenly Dragon Secret Art, Heavenly Dragon Domain, Ice Dragon Domain, God's Domain, 3 levels of the Law of Light. These were all earth-shattering methods. If they were all controlled by the Prince of the Dragons, then who would be his opponent? The Prince of the Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang and Madman, then looked at the soul of the ice dragon and smiled. Don't hesitate, let's begin. All right. The soul of the ice dragon nodded, and instantly entered the prince of the dragon's head. The prince of the dragons also closed his eyes. Boom. Immediately, a terrifying dragon might burst out from his body. At the same time, the prince of the dragon's body also released two different divine lights. One was a sacred milky white divine light. The other was a pure white ice crystal light. Moreover, his temperament also changed. One was a transcendent indifference, the other was fierce, cold-blooded, and ruthless. The two completely different temperaments mixed together, like the combination of a god and a demon. This change didn't last for long. Suddenly, the ice crystal-like divine light, the fierce, cold-blooded, and ruthless temperament began to dissipate. And as these dissipated, the milky white divine light, as well as the transcendent temperament, became more and more intense. After a few breaths, the prince of the dragon's entire body could no longer sense any hostility, as if a god had returned, a sacred aura enveloping all directions. Then, the prince of the dragons slowly opened his eyes. Those gem-like eyes revealed a trace of disappointment as he muttered, "In the end, you still chose to disappear." Fused, Qin Feiyang and Madman looked at the prince of the dragons in surprise. At this moment, they couldn't feel the slightest aura of the dragon's soul from the prince of the dragons. In other words, the one who chose to disappear in the end was actually the soul of the ice dragon. The prince of the dragons raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang and Madman, asking, "Do you know what will happen after I fuse with the soul of the ice dragon?" The two shook their heads. "After we fuse, the consciousness of one side will disappear forever. Originally, I planned to sacrifice myself to preserve the consciousness of the ice dragon's soul. But in the end, the soul of the ice dragon chose to let my consciousness remain. In other words, now the consciousness of the ice dragon's soul is gone." The prince of dragons said, "Disappear forever." Qin Feiyang and the mad scientist looked at each other in surprise. The soul of the ice dragon had never given them a good impression, but they had never thought that it would choose to sacrifice itself. This was worthy of respect. To be honest, I never thought that things would come to this. Although the soul of the ice dragon has always wanted to compete with me for control of my physical body, I really do care about him. He's as good as my brother." The prince of dragons said dejectedly, "I understand. Although I don't have two souls, I used to have inner demons. He was the same in the beginning. He wanted to seize control of his body at every moment. However, later on, we got along very well. Furthermore, we were like brothers. Later on, he also disappeared. But do you know how he disappeared?" As Qin Feiyang said this, he clenched his fists and stared at the prince of dragons. Killing intent surged in his eyes. "Inner demons." The prince of dragons looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise and asked, "How did he disappear?" "Your father," Qin Feiyang said word by word. "Father?" The prince of dragons was stunned. "That's right. Back then, in order to save the living beings of a continent, I opened the gate of rebirth. In the end, I almost died. In order to save me, the inner demons went to the miracle alone. And in the miracle, he met your father, the dragon god of your dragons." Qin Feiyang said. "My father killed him?" The prince of dragons asked. "Yes. Although in the end, your father asked the guardian of the miracle to send a divine pill to bring me back to life, in my heart, I really can't forgive your father. Because I would rather die myself than let the inner demons die for me." Qin Feiyang roared, his face full of pain. The prince of dragons said, "So you and my father have known each other for a long time?" "Yes. We knew each other before entering the ancient world. But I don't have any good feelings for him," Qin Feiyang said. "Although the death of the inner demons made you suffer, it might not be my father's fault. Perhaps it was an equal transaction between them. Using his life in exchange for yours," the prince of dragons said. Qin Feiyang said, "Even so, if it was you, would you be able to let it go?" "No." The prince of dragons shook his head. "Isn't that right? Besides, your father didn't just do this to me. In short, if I have the chance, I won't hesitate to kill your father." Qin Feiyang clenched his hands and said with a murderous aura, "Don't look for my father. The son will pay for the father's debts. Come find me. Today let's settle this once and for all." Ice Dragon Domain. The Prince of Dragons took a step forward, and his cultivation suddenly soared. As expected, Qin Feiyang and the madman's hearts trembled. After the fusion, the Prince of Dragons had already grasped the Ice Dragon Domain. Boom. The next moment, the Prince of Dragons' cultivation rose to the perfection 9th heaven realm, because the madman's Blood Demon Domain was still there. Without the Blood Demon Domain, the Prince of Dragons' cultivation would have risen to the perfection Undead realm. Qin Feiyang said, "Senior brother madman, remove the Blood Demon Domain." "Why?" The madman frowned. "It's meaningless." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Opening the Blood Demon Domain couldn't kill the Prince of Dragons, so it was better to close it and let everyone fight. "All right." The madman nodded, and with a thought the Blood Demon Domain collapsed. Seeing this, the Prince of Dragons also dispersed the Heavenly Dragon Domain. He clearly understood Qin Feiyang's meaning. "Don't play these tricks, let's fight." With the disappearance of the Heavenly Dragon Domain, the madman's cultivation also recovered to the perfection Undead realm under the buff of the Blood Demon technique. Qin Feiyang was still using the Rising Dragon technique, so his cultivation was also at the minor perfection Undead realm. "My Rising Dragon technique is not like your Blood Demon technique and Ice Dragon Domain. The Rising Dragon technique has a time limit, and there isn't much time left. Make your move." Qin Feiyang raised his arm, and a blood-colored sword appeared. The madman waved his hand, and the Sky Piercer appeared. The Prince of Dragons grabbed at the air, and the God-vanquishing sword condensed. Clang! The weapons formed by the three heaven-defying techniques emitted an apocalyptic aura. Kill! Almost at the same time, the three of them roared and charged at each other. Clang! Boom! In just an instant, the three of them clashed together. The blood-colored sword, the Sky Piercer, and the God-vanquishing sword crazily clashed, and the destructive fluctuations were earth-shattering. Chapter 2941. The collision of the three heaven-defying divine arts was enough to destroy the world. The humans and dragons on the various battlefields in the distance all sensed it. They were shocked. They were naturally familiar with the aura of Qin Feiyang and the other two. They were clearly three rising stars, but their battle fluctuations were not the least bit inferior to Long Zun, Qin Batian, and the rest. It wasn't difficult to determine that these three people were the key to this battle. They would affect the outcome of this battle. They are indeed strong. Li Xiaofei helped a companion kill a dragon, and looked in the direction of Qin Feiyang, and the other two with envy in his eyes. Although Qin Feiyang didn't know him, he had long known Qin Feiyang. As the young lord of the Dragon Slayer Palace, he was also secretly comparing. He didn't want to lose to Qin Feiyang, so he worked very hard. But the truth was, no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't seem to catch up to Qin Feiyang's footsteps. It seems that the world now belongs to these three people. Li Xiaofei shook his head and rushed to the next battlefield. After Long Zun wiped out the divine souls of all the supreme humans, the dragons were now all divine dragons. Some had already revealed their true bodies. There were divine dragons that were thousands of feet long, and there were also divine dragons that were thousands of feet long. At this moment, the battle had spread to the entire north, and the large and small battlefields were bleeding. Mountains collapsed and the earth sank. The divine dragons were wailing, and the humans were also roaring in grief. This was a very cruel battle. Blood stained the earth. Bang! Hundreds of breaths passed. Accompanied by a loud bang, Qin Feiyang and Madman smashed into the ground below like two blood-stained meteorites. Puff! When they landed, they spat out a mouthful of blood. In the sky, the Dragon Prince stood against the wind, and the power of the heavenly dragons lingered around his body. He was like a dragon emperor descending into the world, and his mighty dragon aura shook the world. So strong! Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. After the fusion, the Dragon Clan Prince was simply an invincible existence. Indeed strong. Madman crawled up in a sorry state as he kept spitting out blood. The Dragon Prince was already at the small success imperishable stage, And now with the addition of the Ice Dragon domain, he was at the great perfection imperishable stage. But he and Qin Feiyang, one was in the major undead realm, the other was in the minor undead realm. Although there was only a difference of 1 or 2 minor realms, in the undead realm, the difference was like heaven and earth. The most important thing was they couldn't use their trump cards now. The Blood Eye and the Slaughter Field would only open after midnight. Even if I'm strong, I still have to fight. Qin Feiyang shouted. Yes. The future of mankind is in our hands. We must win this war. The madman took a step forward. His blood-stained hair danced wildly as a terrifying baleful aura spread out in all directions. Blood Prison. Soul Extinguishing Technique. The two of them shouted. The Blood Prison and the Soul Extermination Technique were both supreme killing techniques that targeted the soul. They crazily attacked the Prince of the Dragons. Domain of Divinity. The Prince of the Dragons said faintly. The moment the Domain of Divinity appeared, the Soul Extinguishing Technique and the Blood Prison immediately dissipated. Damn, this is too abnormal. The madman cursed. Otherwise, why would it be called the Domain of Divinity? Qin Feiyang said. There wasn't much time left for the Rising Dragon's secret art. They had to end the battle quickly. Roar. Qin Feiyang's body shook. The purple gold dragon soul roared out, and the Eye of Heaven instantly opened. Not only was the Domain of Divinity replicated, but even the Ice Dragon soul was replicated. Boom. At this moment, Qin Feiyang's cultivation rose from the minor undead realm all the way to the great perfection imperishable stage. Your battle soul, isn't it abnormal? The Prince of the Dragons said. Same to you. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and the blood-red sword appeared again, slashing at the Prince of the Dragons. The Prince of the Dragons looked dignified. Because Qin Feiyang was also an invincible existence in the same realm. Not long ago, the battle between Qin Feiyang and the Ice Dragon Soul was the best example. At that time, facing the great perfection imperishable stage Ice Dragon Soul, Qin Feiyang opened the Eye of Heaven and replicated the Ice Dragon domain to suppress the Ice Dragon Soul. However, this was because the Ice Dragon Soul couldn't use the God Extinguishing Art, so it was suppressed by Qin Feiyang. Because only the God Extinguishing Art could compete with the Kill Art. But now, after the fusion, whether it was his own means or the Ice Dragon Soul's means, he could use them all. So the outcome of the battle was still hard to predict. The Prince of the Dragons grabbed the God Extinguishing Art and went forward. Clang. The two God Extinguishing Arts constantly collided. After his cultivation was raised to the great perfection imperishable stage, Qin Feiyang was no longer at a disadvantage when facing the Prince of the Dragons. The strength of the two was completely equal. Madman didn't make a move for the time being, taking the opportunity to heal the injuries on his body and his shattered arm. The battle became more and more intense. Neither of them opened any other God Extinguishing Arts. Because it was useless. The Prince of the Dragons had the God Domain. Qin Feiyang also replicated the God Domain. Those below the heaven-defying stage couldn't break through the God Domain. This was a confrontation of heaven-defying arts. Kacha. The battle lasted for about 100 breaths. The God Extinguishing Art and the blood-colored sword shattered at the same time. The two immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated. Let's end it. After Qin Feiyang stabilized his body, he opened the 3,000 incarnations. The 3,000 incarnations suddenly appeared in the void behind him. 3,000 incarnations, the Prince of the Dragons murmured. Clang. The next moment, the 3,000 incarnations activated the Kill Art at the same time. 3,000 incarnations, 3,000 blood-colored swords, the sharpness tore through heaven and earth. Do you know why I didn't fight when you repeatedly went to Divine Dragon Island to provoke me? The Prince of the Dragons suddenly spoke. Why? Qin Feiyang frowned. The Prince of the Dragons said, I'm just thinking about how to break your 3,000 incarnations. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled and asked, Then have you thought of a way to break it? Actually, it's very simple. The Prince of the Dragons took a step forward and landed in front of Qin Feiyang with the God Domain. The God Domain instantly enveloped the 3,000 incarnations. Just as the 3,000 incarnations were enveloped by the God Domain, they all dissipated in the void. The Prince of the Dragons smiled and said, "The way to break the 3,000 incarnations is the God domain." Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the empty void, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The God domain can make God arts ineffective, but it can't make heaven-defying arts ineffective. Now all 3,000 incarnations have been annihilated, which means that although your 3,000 incarnations seem to be heaven-defying arts, they are not heaven-defying arts. The Prince of the Dragons said. God domain. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. This dragon race prince was indeed a fellow that gave people a headache. Especially the God domain. Although his God domain had not reached the level of a heaven-defying battle soul, its power was comparable to the 3,000 incarnations. The Prince of the Dragons said. So now, the 3,000 incarnations are useless. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "You are the first person who can break my 3,000 incarnations." "I'm honored." The Prince of the Dragons nodded. "But the battle still has to continue." Qin Feiyang took a step forward and activated the battle formula, movement formula, and kill formula in an instant. The Prince of the Dragons immediately retreated. But Qin Feiyang's movement formula was faster. After all, it was a heaven-defying art. In just an instant, Qin Feiyang appeared behind the Prince of the Dragons and slapped the prince's back. "Whether it's speed, strength, or physical strength, I can't compare with you. But it won't be that easy for you to defeat me." God-slaying armor. The Prince of the Dragons said without turning his head, and a set of sacred armor suddenly appeared on his body. This armor covered his entire body and was invulnerable. Qin Feiyang slapped the armor, and most of the power was actually dissipated by the armor. At the same time, the Prince of the Dragons punched Qin Feiyang's chest. Qin Feiyang also had the battle formula to protect his body. Both of them took a step back. Qin Feiyang looked at the God-slaying armor on the Prince of the Dragons in shock. The God-slaying art has a total of 2 moves. One is the God-slaying art, and the other is this God-slaying armor. The Prince of the Dragons stabilized his body and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said in disbelief, "Even now, you are still hiding your strength." "Now that it's gone, this is all my strength," the Prince of the Dragons said. God-slaying armor, God-slaying sword, Qin Feiyang muttered. It was too difficult to deal with. The God-slaying armor and the battle character formula were similar in nature. It was very difficult to break the defense of the God-slaying armor. However, he had another advantage, and that was his speed. Swish. The next moment, Qin Feiyang used the movement formula, held the blood-colored sword in his hand, and launched an attack. The Prince of the Dragons could not keep up with his speed, and could only defend passively. Clang! As long as there was a chance, Qin Feiyang would use the blood-colored sword to attack the God-slaying armor. Because only the blood-colored sword could break the defense of the God-slaying armor. Crack! Very soon cracks appeared on the God-slaying armor. Although the Prince of the Dragons looked calm on the surface, his heart was getting heavier and heavier. To deal with the current Qin Feiyang, he had to have the same speed. However, he did not have a heaven-defying technique like the movement formula. This was his biggest disadvantage. How could he defeat the current Qin Feiyang? Suddenly, while he was fighting, he looked up at the sky. The sky was dark. This was caused by the battle. The battles on the various battlefields were extremely intense, causing the sky that was originally shining with the sun to become unusually dark, as if night had fallen. But he knew that it was still morning. This was because the battle started in the morning. For the time being, he did not have to worry about Qin Feiyang's slaughter field and Frenzy's blood-colored eye. This was because the slaughter field and the blood-colored eye could only be activated in the early morning. Early morning time got it. Suddenly, the Prince of the Dragons' eyes lit up and his battle intent surged. He continued to fight with Qin Feiyang. His injuries were also worsening. This feeling of only being able to defend passively made him very uncomfortable. But it did not matter. He just needed to persevere a little longer. Time passed quietly. Crack! Suddenly, there was an ear-piercing crisp sound from the God-slaying armor, and it broke into pieces. Now is the time. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. Using the movement formula, he rushed behind the Prince of the Dragons at an extremely shocking speed and slashed out with the blood-colored sword. The Prince of the Dragons suddenly felt a fatal crisis. In a hurry, he used the god-slaying formula to block the blood-colored sword. Immediately, his arm could not help but go numb. Qin Feiyang's power was too terrifying. The god-slaying formula almost slipped out of his hand. Chapter 2942. Kill him. Madman roared from below. Slash. Qin Feiyang's eyes were like torches as he put away the blood-colored sword and slashed again with all his strength with a roar. Seeing this, Prince Dragons quickly raised his other arm and grabbed the god-slaying sword with both hands. Clang! The blood-colored sword fell, accompanied by a deafening sound, and the god-slaying art was immediately cut in half. The blood-colored sword carried a monstrous sharpness as it went straight for Prince Dragons' head. Just as Prince Dragons was about to be killed, Qin Feiyang's cultivation suddenly plummeted to the initial imperishable realm. What's going on? Madman was stunned. I've been waiting for this moment. Prince Dragons, on the other hand, was shaken as he slapped Qin Feiyang's lower abdomen with his palm. Puff! Qin Feiyang immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed into the ground below like a meteorite. His lower abdomen caved in as blood splattered everywhere, and his aura also dissipated. Qin Feiyang. After this period of recuperation, Madman's arm had been reconstructed. Seeing this, his expression changed drastically as he hurriedly ran towards Qin Feiyang. How are you? Madman was extremely worried as he looked at Qin Feiyang lying on the ground, because Prince Dragons didn't show any mercy in that palm. On Qin Feiyang's face, one could clearly see a pale and weak state. Not good. My qi is shattered. Qin Feiyang spoke as he coughed up blood, his weakness becoming more and more obvious. The Prince of the Dragon Clan's palm strike was almost fatal to him, because this palm hit his qi. Once his qi was shattered, he would temporarily become a cripple and would no longer be able to participate in the battle. Qi shattered. Madman's eyes trembled slightly when he heard this. He hurriedly took out a life divine pill and a spirit sea pill and stuffed them into Qin Feiyang's mouth. He said in a deep voice, "How did it suddenly become like this?" "It's time for the rising dragon art." Qin Feiyang sighed. "I see." Madman nodded in realization. "Yes. It's very, very difficult to defeat you. And the only chance is to wait until the time limit of the Rising Dragon technique has passed. As long as the Rising Dragon technique's time is up, then even if you keep replicating the Ice Dragon domain, your cultivation will instantly fall to the small success immortal realm." The Prince of Dragons stood in the sky and looked at Qin Feiyang. He was also in a very sorry state. Not only was his body covered in wounds, but there were also several bloody holes on his body, from which dragon blood was constantly flowing out. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "You are indeed a formidable opponent. In such a dangerous battle, if it were anyone else, they would have lost their composure long ago, but the Prince of Dragons was able to maintain his calm. This kind of calm temperament was simply frightening." "You flatter me. Now that your sea of qi has been destroyed, you no longer have the strength to fight. Madman can't open his blood eye right now, so the outcome of this battle has been decided. Follow me, let's do something for the ancient world together." The Prince of Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang and the madman and said. He really admired Qin Feiyang and the madman and didn't want to kill them. "Do something for the ancient world?" The madman sneered, stood up, and looked at the Prince of Dragons. "Will your mother allow it? After this battle, I will persuade my mother to no longer interfere with the matters of the ancient world. In other words, as long as you follow me, the ancient world will be our world in the future. Don't you want to protect the living beings of the ancient world? Actually, this is also a method. It's not that you have to get rid of us dragons for the ancient world to be peaceful. Moreover, as long as we shake hands and make peace, whether it's the Dragon Slayer Temple or us, no one will be sacrificed." The Prince of Dragons said. "It makes sense." The madman nodded. The Prince of Dragons smiled. "So you agree?" "Agree, your sister." The madman roared, releasing his aura. The Prince of Dragons said, "If you really like my sister, I can also make the decision to let her marry you. The madman was startled. Really? Although my sister is naughty, she's actually quite a good person. If you really succeed, then we can be even closer. The Prince of Dragons smiled. What kind of joke is this? How can I marry your sister? The battle isn't over yet. The madman roared, activating the blood demon technique. He rushed into the sky, and the halberd appeared. He grabbed the halberd and charged at the Prince of Dragons. Blood demon technique. Qin Feiyang murmured and suddenly slapped his head. Why was he so stupid before and ignored the madman's blood demon technique? The blood demon technique was stronger than the ice dragon domain, and could increase one's cultivation by 3 small realms. Before, he shouldn't have copied the ice dragon domain, but the blood demon technique. If he copied the blood demon technique and used the rising dragon technique, his cultivation could increase to the great perfection imperishable realm. Great perfection imperishable realm. Not to mention the Prince of Dragons, even the revered dragons weren't his match. He had really made a fatal mistake. Just as Qin Feiyang was extremely angry, the madman and the Prince of Dragons had already started fighting. With the absolute suppression of cultivation, the god-vanquishing sword tore through the sky and shattered the madman's halberd in just a few moments. Chua. Following closely, the Prince of Dragons slapped at the madman's chi-si. Scram. The madman roared. If even his chi-si was shattered, then they would completely lose this battle. The second profound ability of the Law of Slaughter, the God-Killing Sword, appeared and blasted at the God-Vanquishing Sword. Clang. The two collided. The God-Killing Sword also shattered. But the madman took the opportunity to retreat, looking extremely miserable. Chi-si. I must immediately repair my chi-si. Seeing this scene, Qin Feiyang's heart was burning with anxiety. The current Prince of Dragons was too strong. With the madman's current strength, it was impossible to defeat him. Unless he opened the blood eye. But the blood eye could only be opened after midnight. So the only way now was to repair his chi-si, open the eye of heaven, and copy the madman's blood demon technique. Don't be so stubborn. Since we can solve this peacefully, why must we pay with our lives? The Prince of Dragons looked at the madman with a trace of anger in his eyes. Peace. If you dragons really yearn for peace, why did you treat us humans like this all these years? Just like the dragon vanquishing palace. Don't tell me that you still don't understand the root cause of the dragon vanquishing palace's appearance? The madman shouted. Because of me? The Prince of Dragons frowned. Yes. The dragon vanquishing palace was born because of Qin Batian. And why did Qin Batian create the dragon vanquishing palace? This is because your mother wanted to deprive him of his bloodline power. And why did your mother want to deprive him of his bloodline power? Didn't she do it for you? She wanted you to fuse with the bloodline power of the purple gold divine dragon and become the first purple gold divine dragon in history. Tell me, isn't all of this because of you? Although you might not have thought so, and you might not have thought about Qin Batian and Qin Feiyang's bloodline power, you can't deny that this is directly related to you. The madman said. After hearing this, the Prince of Dragons fell silent. If you really want to reconcile, you can. But the condition is that you dragons must get out of the ancient world and never appear again. I want to ask you, can you do it? Even if you can do it, can you persuade your mother and your clansmen? The madman shouted. The Prince of Dragons looked at the madman, then looked at Qin Feiyang and sighed. It seems that we have to fight to the death. Yes. Not to mention us. The creatures of the ancient world will not allow us to reconcile with you dragons. The grudge between the dragons and humans has long reached the point where it's either you die or I die. So don't be naive. Reconciliation will never happen. Humans, dragons, one side must perish today. The madman roared, and the halberd appeared again. He charged at the Prince of Dragons without hesitation. If one side really perishes, the Prince of Dragons murmured and suddenly looked at the madman. Killing intent surged in his eyes as he said, then I can only choose, you humans perish. Boom. Rolling Dragon's might roared out. The sky here suddenly collapsed as if it was the end of the world. What to do? looking at the madman who was like a moth flying into the flame. Qin Feiyang was extremely anxious. Feiyang, quickly come to the Black Tortoise world. The mermaid princess voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang was stunned. I told you to come. The little boy's voice sounded, and immediately after, Qin Feiyang felt the power of the Black Tortoise world enveloping him. And in the next moment, he appeared in the Devil's Land. Obviously, it was the little boy who brought Qin Feiyang to the Black Tortoise world. Qin Feiyang said angrily. At a time like this, how can I abandon senior brother madman and escape alone? It's not escaping, I'll help you repair your qi. The mermaid princess landed in front of Qin Feiyang. Repair qi? Qin Feiyang looked at the mermaid princess in a daze. The mermaid princess laughed. Have you forgotten? I have the Eye of Life. And me. Accompanied by a familiar voice, the demon ancestor landed beside Qin Feiyang and laughed. We haven't fought for so long. I'm afraid you've forgotten that I also have a forbidden technique, the Soul of Life. Eye of Life. Soul of Life. Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled. Don't say it. He had forgotten. The Eye of Life was the battle soul of the mermaid princess, and it had the heaven-defying ability to regenerate flesh from bones. The demon ancestor's Soul of Life was the same. However, opening the Soul of Life required one's lifespan as the price. However, it was only helping him repair his qi, and it wouldn't use much lifespan. After coming back to his senses, Qin Feiyang hurriedly shouted. Then hurry up. The mermaid princess and the demon ancestor looked at each other. A bright golden light suddenly emerged from behind the mermaid princess. It was a big golden fish. As soon as the big golden fish appeared, a golden light enveloped Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang immediately felt warm and comfortable all over his body. The demon ancestor also opened his Soul of Life, and a majestic energy poured into Qin Feiyang's body. Under the joint efforts of the two, Qin Feiyang's injuries and qi were healed in an instant. Thank you. Qin Feiyang said gratefully and immediately disappeared. Chapter 2943. In the blink of an eye. Only a moment had passed outside. Frenzy and Prince Dragons hadn't collided yet. Senior brother Frenzy retreat. Qin Feiyang immediately roared as a blood-red sword appeared, and slashed at Prince Dragons. Frenzy and Prince Dragons looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze. What's going on? After disappearing for a while, his Sea of Qi was restored? And not only did it restore his Sea of Qi, even his injuries were all healed. The current him didn't look injured at all. Ignoring the shocked gazes of the two, Qin Feiyang directly opened the dragon soul and the Eye of Heaven to copy Frenzy's blood demon technique. Boom. In just a moment, Qin Feiyang's cultivation soared to the great success undead stage. Following closely, the blood-red sword slashed at Prince Dragons. Prince Dragons came back to his senses and waved the god-vanquishing sword at the blood-red sword. Even if he copied the blood demon technique, Qin Feiyang's cultivation was still a small realm away from Prince Dragons. With a crack, the blood-red sword immediately shattered. Qin Feiyang's body shook as a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He grabbed Frenzy and retreated. Qin Feiyang, what's going on with you? Frenzy looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, You will know later, let's solve the problem in front of us first. Your recovery ability is really abnormal. Prince Dragons also looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. It's okay, Qin Feiyang said. However, even if you restore your Sea of Qi, it won't be of much use in this battle. Prince Dragons shook his head. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The Rising Dragon technique had been activated twice. The first time was when he was fighting with the patriarchs of the dragons. The second time was when he left the inland sea and opened it with the soul of the ice dragon. Therefore, he could no longer activate the Rising Dragon technique. The madman looked at the dragon prince and frowned at Qin Feiyang. It's useless if you can't activate the Rising Dragon chant. We can only take a gamble now. Qin Feiyang's eyes darkened. What kind of bet? Madman was bewildered. Let's take a gamble and see if the two different deity arts are about to stack. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, the Eye of Heaven activated once more. enveloping the Prince of the Dragons. That was right. He wanted to copy the mad scientist's blood demon technique and the ice dragon's domain at the same time. If these two cultivation-boosting divine arts could be stacked, then his cultivation would rise to the peak of the undead realm. However, he had never tried something like this before, so he didn't have much confidence in himself. What do you want? The Prince of Dragons frowned. Madman also looked at Qin Feiyang with a puzzled expression. But suddenly, both of them understood and asked in unison, how is this possible? Copying the blood demon technique and the ice dragon domain at the same time? No matter how heaven-defying the Eye of Heaven was, it couldn't be heaven-defying to this extent. However, before he finished speaking, Qin Feiyang's cultivation suddenly soared. What? The madman and the Prince of Dragons' eyes trembled. Boom. The next moment, Qin Feiyang's cultivation increased to the peak of the undead realm. And it didn't stop, it was still soaring. In the blink of an eye, Qin Feiyang's aura soared again, stepping into the peak of the undead realm. The two were dumbfounded. It could actually be copied at the same time. Qin Feiyang himself was also stunned. This was too unexpected. Copying two cultivation-boosting divine arts at the same time. And the key point was that it succeeded? Pervert. What a pervert. The madman came back to his senses and shook his head in shock. Aren't your fighting souls perverted? Qin Feiyang said. The god's domain could even break the 3,000 incarnations. And the madman's blood eye was ridiculously strong, almost wiping out the dragons. Even an expert like the dragon sovereign couldn't avoid the fate of being petrified. To be honest, compared to the madman's blood eye, the Eye of Heaven wasn't that powerful. Whoosh. The Prince of Dragons took a deep breath and looked at Qin Feiyang and the madman. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. You two are really hard to deal with. He thought that victory was in his hands, but he didn't expect Qin Feiyang not only to instantly repair his qi, but also to copy two different cultivation-boosting divine arts. Forcing us to this point, aren't you also hard to deal with? Qin Feiyang smiled. The Prince of Dragons said, then next should be the final battle. Qin Feiyang nodded. The Prince of Dragons grabbed the god-vanquishing sword and shook his arm slightly. A monstrous aura surged out. Qin Feiyang also raised his arm. As killing intent surged out, a blood-colored sword appeared. The madman consciously retreated. After all, Qin Feiyang was the main character. How could he steal Qin Feiyang's limelight? Whoosh! The two stood in the air and let out a long breath at the same time. Then, a strong killing intent appeared in their eyes at the same time. Kill! With a loud roar, the two grabbed the blood-colored sword and god-vanquishing sword and charged towards each other. And at this moment, both of them had the heart to fight. Whether it was their eyes or their expressions, they were incomparably cold. The madman standing in the distance looked at the two and smiled. This battle, whether you win or lose, is destined to be recorded in the annals of history and be passed down through the ages. The Prince of Dragons was a respectable person. It was just that their standpoints were different. If the Prince of Dragons was also a human, then with his personality, he would definitely stand up bravely and face the dragons like them. If that was the case, then they wouldn't be enemies now, but partners fighting side by side. Unfortunately, all of this was destined the moment they were born. Clang! Boom! Finally, Qin Feiyang and the Prince of Dragons collided. A destructive wave suddenly erupted between the blood-colored sword and the god-vanquishing sword. At this moment, the world within a radius of tens of millions of miles was drowned in blood-colored light and milky white divine light. The humans and dragons on the battlefield couldn't help but stop fighting and look in the direction of Qin Feiyang's group. Long Zun Qin Batian and the others were the same. This is Feiyang's aura. How did his aura become so strong? It seems to be great perfection, imperishable stage. Lu Xingyang exclaimed. Great perfection, imperishable stage. Long Zun was shocked. He carefully observed and found that it was indeed the great perfection, imperishable stage. How was this possible? How could a half-step imperishable stage raise his cultivation to the great perfection, imperishable stage? Did he activate the slaughter domain? But that couldn't be right. The slaughter domain could only be activated once a day. Moreover, even if he activated it, it shouldn't be his aura that reached the great perfection imperishable stage, but the blood-colored sword's aura. What on earth happened? The ancestral dragons were also very surprised and puzzled. Facing Wang Chang, the Ice Emperor, the Rain Emperor, Yang Li and Wang Ming, they already had the upper hand. As long as they were given a little more time, they were completely confident that they could kill the 5 of them. Even if Yang Li now controlled the power of laws. But now, Qin Feiyang's cultivation had reached the great perfection imperishable stage. Only Long Zun could contend with an ultimate expert of this level. Could His Highness win? If His Highness was defeated by Qin Feiyang, it would be a nightmare for the dragons. Because Qin Feiyang and Madman's strength were both existences that could instantly kill them. Once His Highness was defeated by Qin Feiyang and Madman would rush over to support. Then this battle would basically be over. Your Highness, you can't lose. The ancestral dragons roared in their hearts. High up in the sky, the blood-colored sword and the god-vanquishing sword collided, and destructive fluctuations surged out. For the dragons, I can't lose. Prince of the Dragons roared. For the common people, I can't lose either. Qin Feiyang roared. Both of their auras were like rainbows. Not only were the 2 heaven-defying divine arts colliding, but also their auras, their fighting spirit, their beliefs, were also colliding. Kill. All of a sudden, the 2 of them roared and unleashed their full power, turning the void here into chaos. Crack. Accompanied by a crisp sound, the god-vanquishing sword was finally no match, and cracks appeared on it before it disintegrated. No! Prince of the Dragons roared, and his entire body emitted a bright divine light. Roar. The next moment, accompanied by a loud dragon roar, a huge heavenly dragon appeared out of nowhere. This was the true body of Prince of the Dragons. It was 10,000 feet long and covered in dragon scales, emitting a blazing radiance. I won't admit defeat. I can't admit defeat either, because I'm the Prince of the Dragons, and I still have to protect my people. Qin Feiyang, come. Following an earth-shaking roar, the Dragon Prince's 30,000-meter-tall body immediately tore through the primal chaos and roared at Qin Feiyang. Clang. The god-vanquishing sword appeared again. The god-vanquishing armor also appeared, enveloping the entire dragon body, and its divine might shook the world. Come. Qin Feiyang also activated the battle formula, holding the blood-colored sword in his hand, and charged forward. This was their strongest attack, and also their last attack. The victory or defeat of this battle, the fate of humans and dragons, all depended on this attack. Boom. Clang. Finally, the 2 collided again. That destructive momentum, that dazzling divine light, like a tsunami in the ocean, flooded all directions. At this moment, even Madman couldn't see the situation of the 2 through the divine light. But although his eyes were stung by the divine light, he still didn't close his eyes. He stared fixedly at the center of the battlefield, his expression somewhat expectant and somewhat nervous. Although Qin Feiyang's cultivation base had reached the great perfection undead realm, Prince of the Dragon's strength was also obvious to all. Before seeing the outcome with his own eyes, he couldn't feel at ease. Rumble. The airwaves billowed, destroying all directions, and even spread to all major battlefields. The surrounding earth was cracking wildly, and abyssal cracks appeared. Lin Yi and the sloppy old man felt it the most. Because they stood outside the heavenly prison, they could clearly see the scene below. With the battlefield of Qin Feiyang and Prince of the Dragons as the center, abyssal cracks appeared in all directions. The entire earth seemed to be covered with a layer of spider web. The sloppy old man said, "Girl, do you know how strong your brother Feiyang and Prince of the Dragons are now?" "They must be very strong," Lin Yi said. "Yes. The current them, even this old man is no match for them. And that little madman. That bloody eye, even this old man can't escape the fate of being petrified. These young people nowadays are really terrifying." The sloppy old man shook his head. Lin Yi heard the words and looked down at the center of the battlefield. A smile also appeared on her beautiful cheeks. Regardless of whether Qin Feiyang wins or loses in this battle, he was still her most respected big brother in her heart. Chapter 2944. All the battlefields fell into a brief silence at this time. Everyone was looking forward to it, nervous and nervous. At the center of the battlefield, the divine light that shrouded the battlefield had slowly dissipated. The aura of Qin Feiyang and Prince Dragons also gradually faded. Gradually, two figures appeared. It was Qin Feiyang and Prince Dragons. The two were still facing each other across the air, but the difference was that Qin Feiyang only had a few wounds on his body, but Prince Dragon's body was bruised all over. Blood continuously flowed out of that 100,000-foot-tall body. It was like a bloody waterfall that dyed the sky red. The winner is Brother Feiyang. Lin Yi suddenly smiled sweetly, like a blooming lily. She was extremely beautiful. Yes, this little guy, as this old man thought, is full of miracles. The sloppy old man looked down at Qin Feiyang with admiration in his eyes. Battlefield. Not only was Prince Dragon's bruised all over, but his eyes were also extremely weak. He floated in the air with difficulty. Looking at Qin Feiyang opposite him, he sighed, "I lost." Qin Feiyang nodded. Prince Dragon said in disappointment, "It seems that I am not as good as you after all." "No. You are strong. And you are the strongest person I have ever met in my life. The most important thing is that although I defeated you, I don't feel any joy in my heart." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yes. Logically speaking, he should be happy and excited to defeat Prince Dragons. However, he couldn't be happy. Instead, there was a sense of loss. "No joy," Prince Dragons murmured and suddenly smiled. "If the winner is me now, I should be the same as you. Because you both value and respect each other, so in your hearts, you don't want each other to die." Madman stepped forward and said while looking at the two. "Maybe." The Prince of the Dragons smiled and said, "It's an honor to meet you." Qin Feiyang and Madman looked at each other. They then looked at Prince Dragons and smiled. "We are the same. I hope that we won't be enemies in the next life." The Prince of the Dragons said, "If there really is a next life, I will definitely come and find you." "Are you looking for revenge?" Qin Feiyang asked. "I'm looking for you guys to drink until we're drunk." The Prince of the Dragons smiled. "Haha." Madman laughed loudly and said, "I'll be waiting for you anytime, but that brat Qin Feiyang sigh, he's very unromantic and doesn't drink." "Really?" The Prince of the Dragons was surprised. "If it's a reunion with an old friend, I wouldn't mind getting drunk." Qin Feiyang smiled. The three of them were like friends, chatting and laughing, without the slightest tension of a great battle. If only this war didn't happen. The sloppy old man stood outside the Heaven's prison and couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. Yeah, without this war, they will definitely be good friends. Lin Yi nodded. The Prince of the Dragons was indeed a different kind of dragons. He was indifferent to fame and fortune, he stood aloof from worldly affairs, he was humble and low-key, and he cared about the common people. Such a man was more charming than anyone else. It was a pity. He was born among the dragons. Although he was very reluctant, he had to fight for the dragons. This was his life. Below, the Prince of the Dragons' weakness had become more and more obvious. The light in his eyes had already dimmed, as if they were dead ashes. He glanced at Divine Land and smiled. Well, all of this is finally over. I can be considered completely free. You're quite relaxed. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Just as you humans often say, everyone will eventually die. I'm not afraid. I just can't let go of my family and my people. The Prince of the Dragons sighed and looked at Qin Feiyang and Madman. Can you promise me one thing? Say it. Qin Feiyang said. The Prince of the Dragons said, please give my mother and my sister a way out. Qin Feiyang and Madman went silent. The Prince of the Dragons looked at the reaction of the two and shook his head. I knew it. This will make things difficult for you. Forget it, pretend I didn't say anything. After saying that, he looked up in the direction of Longzuan and smiled. Mother, I have tried my best. As his voice fell, the Prince of the Dragons slowly closed his eyes and fell down powerlessly. Qin Feiyang and Madman sighed and waved their arms at the same time. With a bang, a huge pit appeared on the ground below. Immediately after, Qin Feiyang released another strand of divine power, holding the body of the dragons, and slowly sank into the huge pit. Dragons, I will not let you go. But I promise you that I will leave behind an inheritance for you dragons. Qin Feiyang looked at the prince of the dragons and muttered. He waved his hand, and as the soil churned, the prince of the dragons was gradually buried underground. Madman retracted his gaze and said angrily, "This mood is really bad." The prince of the dragons was clearly the enemy, but seeing him die and be buried, he couldn't help but feel sad. This is also him. If it was other dragons, would you care? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. Care my ass. I can destroy him with a slap. Madman pouted. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked up at the battlefield. His eyes suddenly surged with a cold light. The battle is not over yet, let's continue. Longzuan, the 10 ancestral dragons, Madman whispered, his eyes suddenly emitting a monstrous bloody light. So, in the next moment, the two turned into a stream of light, carrying monstrous killing intent as they rushed towards the battlefield where Longzuan was. The aura of His Highness Prince. At the same time, the eyes of the ancestral dragons were wide open, filled with disbelief. The aura of His Highness Prince had actually dissipated. What did this mean? It meant that he might have already fallen. They didn't dare to think further. His Highness Prince was the strongest battle strength of the dragons. In some aspects, he even surpassed his mother, Longzuan. To the dragons, he was a pillar that supported the heavens. Once he fell, it would be a devastating disaster for the dragons. Impossible. Longzuan was also shaking her head and muttering. She had a lot of confidence in this child, and was full of expectations. Furthermore, everyone had witnessed this child's methods. Heavenly Dragon Secret Art, God's Domain, Heavenly Dragon Domain, Ice Dragon Domain, and God-slaying art, with so many heaven-defying methods. How could he lose to Madman and Qin Feiyang? But, how could this disappearing aura be explained? Did Madman and Feiyang really win? At the same time, Qin Batian, Yi Zhong and the others were also extremely nervous. Because they also knew how powerful the Prince of Dragons was. Although Qin Feiyang and Madman were also strong, the Prince of Dragons was not inferior to the two of them. So, as for the battle between the three of them, they really couldn't predict who would win, and who would lose in the end. At this moment, sensing that the aura of the Prince of Dragons had dissipated, logically speaking, they should be happy, but their hearts were filled with anxiety instead. Because in their opinion, defeating the Prince of Dragons was really not an easy task. It wasn't that they didn't have confidence in Qin Feiyang and Madman. The strength of Madman and Qin Feiyang was also in front of them. Qin Feiyang had always been their hope. But the strength displayed by the Prince of Dragons was too shocking. So at this moment, they all felt like they were dreaming. Before getting confirmation, they didn't dare to make a conclusion easily. Amidst the tense anticipation, under the heavy atmosphere, whoosh, two figures finally entered their line of sight. It's Feiyang and little Madman. Immediately, Yi Zhong and the others trembled, joy creeping onto their faces. Longzun and the other ancestral dragons also trembled violently. But the difference was that their hearts were drowned in grief and fear. Whoosh! Very soon, Qin Feiyang and Madman both landed opposite Longzun. Where's the Prince of Dragons? Cloud Supreme immediately asked. He's already. Qin Feiyang looked at Cloud Supreme and then at Longzun, saying he's already dead. Longzun's body and mind trembled. This was something she didn't want to hear. Qin Feiyang continued. I buried him with my own hands. Bastard! What right do you have to bury him? If anyone is to be buried, it should be me. Longzun roared. Of course I have the right. Because we're friends. As for you, to be honest, you really don't have the right. Although you're his mother, ask yourself, what have you done for him? You, from the beginning to the end, have blindly strengthened your ambitions and desires on him. Haven't you realized it yet? Half of his death was caused by you. Qin Feiyang shouted. Shut up. Longzun roared. Didn't he once ask you to stop and not treat humans like this? But have you ever heard of it? You think you're the ruler of the ancient world. Those who follow me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. Even if it's your own son, it's still loyal and unpleasant to the ear in front of you. Think about it again. Why did Master leave you dragons? And why did Wang Chang and the others take the initiative to come to me? So many people have left. Haven't you reflected on yourself? If you dragons can be a little nicer to us humans, even if it's just a little bit, would it have led to this situation? No. Humans are creatures that know how to be grateful. If you're good to them, they will naturally respect you. So, all of this was caused by you. Your son also died because of you. Qin Feiyang shouted. Don't say anymore, don't say anymore. Long Zun shook her head frantically. Although her expression couldn't be seen, it wasn't hard to tell from her tone that she was in pain. The rule of you dragons has ended. The current ancient world belongs to all the people in the world. Pay the price for your cold-bloodedness. Master Ancestor, hold her back. Senior Brother Madman, follow me to kill the ancestral dragons. Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with killing intent as he took a step forward and rushed toward the battlefield of the ancestral dragons. The madman chuckled and followed closely behind. You all deserve to die. All of you deserve to die. Long Zun roared as a terrifying spacetime law emerged. Qin Batian and the others' pupils shrank. Third profound ability, Spacetime Storm. The dragons roared as a terrifying storm appeared around them. Spacetime Storm. Qin Baishan's eyes trembled as he shouted, all of you retreat. Chapter 2945. But before he could finish, the lower half of Sovereign Beast's body was swallowed by the storm. Immediately, Sovereign Beast screamed in agony. Both of his legs were instantly crushed by the storm. So strong. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Sovereign Cloud had the body of a Qilin, and was a perfected imperishable stage expert. But he couldn't even withstand a single blow from the storm. All of you die. Sovereign Dragon sneered. The storm grew bigger and fiercer. From afar, it looked like a giant tornado sweeping in all directions. Yi Zhong, Sovereign Cloud, and Lu Xingyang grabbed Sovereign Beast and dragged him out of the storm. Then they flew away without looking back. Even with that being the case, their bodies were still covered with cuts and bruises from the fluctuations of the storm. If the space-time storm isn't stopped, it will expand infinitely and eventually destroy the entire divine land. Qin Batian stepped back to Qin Feiyang and Madman's side and said in a deep voice, so powerful. The two were shocked. The space-time law is one of the strongest laws in the world. And this space-time storm is the third profound theurgy. It can be said that even the dragon's third profound theurgy, the holy sword of light, can't stop the space-time storm. Qin Batian said. Then isn't it invincible? Qin Feiyang frowned. Qin Batian said. I'm afraid that no one can stop it now except for me. You? Qin Feiyang and Madman were stunned. What? You don't believe me? Qin Batian smiled. No. Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand. Whether it was in the Great Qin or the ancient world, the ancestors could leave behind so many legends. How could they be ordinary? All of you shall perish. Sovereign Dragon laughed, and the storm became even more terrifying. Qin Feiyang and Madman were already moving uncontrollably toward the storm. I'll deal with Sovereign Dragon. You guys go support the other battlefields. Qin Batian stepped in front of Qin Feiyang and Madman, and a mighty aura suddenly emerged from his body. As soon as this aura appeared, Qin Feiyang and Madman immediately felt a great sense of danger. Domain of Severance. As Qin Batian waved his hand, a white divine light spewed out from his fingertip. Blinked. This white divine light turned into a giant prison and crashed down. Then, the terrifying storm and dragons were shrouded in the prison. What? Sovereign Dragon was shocked. This is a heaven-defying divine art, the domain of severance. It can seal everything, Qin Batian stated. You actually have a heaven-defying divine art? Sovereign Dragon. That's right. Qin Batian nodded and said, if my cultivation was weaker than yours, this domain of severance would not be able to trap the space-time storm, but unfortunately, under the buff of the domain of severance, I am now at the great perfection undead realm. The domain of severance became more and more solid. No matter how the space-time storm bombarded, the domain of severance did not show any signs of breaking. Bastard! Sovereign Dragon roared again and again. This bastard is also hiding his strength. Madman looked at the domain of severance, his eyes full of astonishment. What are you talking about? He is my ancestor. Can you respect him a little? Qin Feiyang said angrily. Che. I and Qin Batian are of the same generation. What is there to respect? Madman's face was full of disdain. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched, and for a moment he really couldn't refute. If Madman was of the same generation as him, then Qin Batian was considered Madman's senior, and should be respected. But the key point was, according to seniority, Madman was indeed of the same generation as Qin Batian. However, his ancestor's methods were indeed a little unexpected. Originally, he thought that his ancestor only had a heaven-defying artifact, but he also had a heaven-defying technique. Sure enough, a legendary figure who could leave behind countless legends couldn't be underestimated. Let's go. Slay the dragon. Madman turned to look at the various ancestral dragons. Killing intent flashed in his eyes, and he immediately charged towards the black dragon ancestral dragon. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly, and with a thought, the mermaid princess and ancestor devil appeared. I'll have to trouble you to heal everyone, Qin Feiyang said. No problem. The two nodded and rushed into the sky. Eye of life. Soul of life. With two low shouts, a mighty life force suddenly rolled out with the two as the center. Sovereign Beast's feet that were shattered by the space-time storm instantly recovered. The scene. Not only Sovereign Beast, but even Yizhong and Cloud Supreme were dumbfounded. They raised their heads to look at the devil ancestor and the mermaid princess. This healing ability was too terrifying. Even stronger than the dragon sovereign's healing ability. Madman was also stunned. He raised his head to look at the two of them and said in realization, so it's because of them. Then, he glared at Qin Feiyang and said, You brat, you're too much. You actually hid such a terrifying healing ability? When he was fighting with the dragon's prince, he was seriously injured. He should have let the mermaid princess and devil ancestor help to heal him. I didn't think of it at the time. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. Get lost. Madman glared at him angrily, and continued to attack the black dragon ancestral dragon. The injuries on his body were also instantly healed. At the same time, on the various battlefields. For example, Wang Chang, Yang Li Li Xiaofei in short. As long as it was a human, their injuries would be healed in an instant. What's going on? This unforeseen event caused everyone to be stunned. But the dragons were panicking. Because of the betrayal of Wang Chang and the others, the dragons were already at a disadvantage. But now, the injuries of these humans were all inexplicably healed. How could they continue fighting? At this moment, Qin Feiyang also truly experienced the terror of the mermaid princess and the devil ancestor. Although they were only at the half-step undead realm, their effect was greater than anyone else's. The dragon sovereign was trapped. The others' injuries were also healed. Then now, it was time to deal with the ancestral dragons. Master, help protect my wife. Qin Feiyang looked at Yizhong and smiled, then turned and stepped into the air. Wife! The mermaid princess in the air heard this, and her face immediately turned red. This brat. Yizhong also shook his head and scolded with a smile. The mermaid princess suddenly noticed the abnormality of the devil ancestor. His entire person seemed to have aged several decades. At this moment, her expression changed slightly and she hurriedly said, Turn off the soul of life first. Although the soul of life's healing ability was terrifying, it came at the cost of lifespan. Such a large-scale treatment was very strenuous for the devil ancestor. Then you alone? The devil ancestor frowned. I can. The mermaid princess nodded. All right then. The devil ancestor immediately turned off the soul of life and began to absorb the energy of the eye of life. Because the energy of the eye of life could restore his vitality. Old bastard, are you desperate? In the distance, Madman rushed to the front of the black dragon ancestral dragon and laughed. Little bastard. The black dragon ancestral dragon was instantly furious. The other 9 ancestral dragons' eyes were also filled with resentment. You guys retreat. Madman waved his hand. Hearing this, Wang Ming, Wang Chang, Yang Li, Ice Emperor, and Rain Emperor immediately turned and rushed to other battlefields. It was already not easy for them to hold on until now. Moreover, they were all in a situation of 1 against 2, and this was all thanks to Yang Li. Because Yang Li now controlled the power of laws, he could barely hold back 4 or 5 of them. This was the strength of the power of laws. The difference in strength between those who possessed the power of laws and those who did not was like heaven and earth. Swish. At this time, Qin Feiyang also rushed over and stood beside Madman, scanning the 10 ancestral dragons. What are you doing here? I can deal with them alone. Madman frowned. Is this the time to show off? We have to end this quickly and then think of a way to deal with the dragon sovereign together. Qin Feiyang said. All right. Madman nodded and looked at the 10 ancestral dragons. Any last words? Go to hell. The blood-colored ancestral dragon roared and instantly returned to its true form. It was a blood dragon that was more than 10,000 feet long. That huge tail covered in blood-colored dragon scales directly slapped towards Qin Feiyang and Madman. Courting death. Madman took a step forward and activated the blood demon technique. His cultivation instantly soared to the great achievement Imperishable Realm. This cultivation was already the same as the 10 ancestral dragons. Following closely, Madman's group attacked the blood dragon's huge tail. That terrifying power was like a torrent that had opened a gate, rolling out. One had to know that Madman's current physical body had already reached the supreme level. Even if the blood dragon ancestral dragon revealed its true form, its physical body couldn't match Madman's. With a punch, the blood dragon ancestral dragon immediately shattered and blood and flesh splattered in all directions. Ancestral dragon? What a joke! Madman sneered. From the beginning, he didn't take these ancestral dragons seriously. The only one he was truly afraid of was the dragon sovereign. But later, the Prince of Dragons appeared. But for the Prince of Dragons, he had no fear, only respect. You guys should also show your true abilities. Qin Feiyang looked at the other 9 ancestral dragons. These 2 little bastards are actually riding on our heads and behaving atrociously. What a shame! Roar! The 9 ancestral dragons also revealed their true forms, their anger soaring into the sky. Boom! The 10 ancestral dragons charged towards Qin Feiyang and Madman together, their dragon might shaking the world. Don't say it. If it were anyone else, such as Wang Ming and the others, they wouldn't dare to fight the 10 ancestral dragons head-on, because they were indeed quite strong. But in the eyes of Madman and Qin Feiyang, this was nothing at all. Qin Feiyang also instantly activated the Eye of Heaven and copied Madman's blood demon technique. Immediately, his cultivation soared to the great success Imperishable stage. New and old debts, let's settle them together today. Qin Feiyang took a step forward, and his aura roared in all directions. Have a taste of despair. Madman also smiled sinisterly. Neither of them used anything fancy, and their fists directly smashed out. Rumble, crack, clang. Dragon scales shattered one after another, and dragon blood stained the sky. Looking at the 2 brave and invincible people, Yi Zhong and the others in the distance were gratified. It seems that there's no need for us old guys to take action, Lu Zhengyang said with a smile. Apart from restraining the dragon sovereign, we didn't do much, Venerable Cloud said. To be honest, this old man really didn't expect them to grow to this extent in just these few years. Yi Zhong shook his head. Thinking back to the first time he saw Qin Feiyang was just a small paramount god at that time. And how long had it been? He had actually grown to an existence that could crush all the ancestral dragons. It was true that the new generation surpassed the old. Chapter 2946. Roar. The battle only lasted for 100 breaths before the 10 ancestral dragons wailed and smashed into the ground below. Their bodies were all badly mutilated. This is the strength of an ancestral dragon? Sure enough, you guys only have the qualifications to rely on the dragon sovereign. Madman looked at them with contempt. Bastard, you will die a horrible death. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon roared. Sorry, I still have a long life, but your life has already reached the end. Madman stood proudly as the Blood Demon Domain appeared and shrouded the 10 ancestral dragons. Blood Demon Domain. The 10 ancestral dragons' faces changed. Once this Blood Demon Domain fell, even if they had heaven-defying means, they wouldn't be a match for Madman and Qin Feiyang. White Dragon Ancestral Dragon roared. Old Black, leave quickly, we will hold him back. As soon as his voice fell, the 9 ancestral dragons immediately charged towards Qin Feiyang and Madman. Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon also didn't hesitate as he turned around and fled. Emperor Divine Prison. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang's voice sounded. The dragon soul roared out, and the Emperor Divine Prison instantly shrouded all directions. Including Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon, they were immediately imprisoned in the void. Immediately after, as the Blood Demon Domain fell, the cultivation of the 10 ancestral dragons began to plummet. Qin Feiyang said, You actually let Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon escape alone? You guys are really loyal. Hearing this, White Dragon Ancestral Dragon and the others couldn't help but panic. Do you really think I don't know that the other dragons, as well as the Sovereign Divine Weapon, and the Divine Soul you left in the Holy Mountain, are now in Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon's spatial divine item? If you let him escape, even if you die in our hands, you can still be reborn. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Bastard, you really want to exterminate us? The ancestral dragons stared at Qin Feiyang in shock and anger. Didn't you guys also want to go to the 4 major regions and exterminate us humans? I'm just giving you a taste of your own medicine. Qin Feiyang said. You are a madman. Ancestral Dragon Golden Dragon roared. Madman said. Are you scared, silly? I'm the crazy one. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Lunatic. He looked at the 10 ancestor dragons and said, Hand over the spatial divine item, and I will leave your corpses intact. Impossible. Ancestor White Dragon enunciated each word clearly. Then I'll do it myself. Qin Feiyang took a step forward. Ancestor White Dragon's eyes trembled, and he hurriedly transmitted his voice. Everyone, we are at the end of our rope. In order to protect our clansmen in the spatial divine item, we can only, speaking of which, Ancestor White Dragon paused for a moment. In the next moment, her eyes were filled with determination as she roared. Self-destruction is the only option. Boom. Immediately, a destructive aura rushed out of her body. The other ancestral dragons looked at each other and unleashed their destructive auras. Only the Black Dragon Ancestral Dragon did not self-destruct. This was because he still had the divine item that protected the space to leave. Old hey, no matter what, we have to escape with the spatial divine item. Ancestor White Dragon roared. Naive. Qin Feiyang ruthlessly interrupted her and said coldly, Innate ability, deprive consciousness. In an instant, the consciousness of the 10 ancestor dragons fell into a blank. Blood prison. At the same time, Madman waved his hand, and the blood prison enveloped them. An invisible force immediately rushed into the heads of the 10 ancestor dragons. Roar! Accompanied by wails, the divine souls of the 10 ancestor dragons were immediately erased by the blood prison. It could be said that the two cooperated quite well, not giving the 10 ancestor dragons the slightest chance to turn the situation around. As their divine souls were erased, the life fluctuations of the 10 ancestor dragons also began to rapidly dissipate. They have a tacit understanding. Qin Feiyang looked at Madman in surprise. Originally, he wanted to activate the soul destruction technique, but he didn't expect Madman to open the blood prison first. Only a ghost would have a tacit understanding with you. Madman rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang and stepped out of the Emperor Divine Prison. His divine sense surged out and poured into Ancestor Black Dragon's body. Soon, his eyes lit up. With a thought, a palm-sized ancient pagoda flew out of Ancestor Black Dragon's body and landed in his hand. This is his spatial divine item. Madman turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang and chuckled. I'll leave it with you first. After dealing with the Dragon Sovereign, I'll go in and destroy their divine souls. Qin Feiyang said. But as his voice fell, the ancient pagoda suddenly broke free from Madman's hand and flew into the distance. Qin Feiyang and Madman were taken aback. Immediately after, Qin Feiyang used the walk formula and chased after it like lightning. He grabbed the ancient pagoda and poured his divine sense inside. Inside the ancient pagoda, he immediately found a blood contract. This was obviously the blood contract of Ancestor Black Dragon. Although Ancestor Black Dragon was dead, there was still a wisp of his divine soul, so the blood contract didn't dissipate. A mere wisp of divine soul wants to overturn the heavens? Qin Feiyang snorted and forcefully erased the blood contract inside. Then you keep it. Madman looked at Qin Feiyang and said. Qin Feiyang nodded and dripped his blood to bind the ancient pagoda and sent it into his Qi Si. Then, the two of them released their divine sense in all directions. The situation of the various battlefields immediately entered their sight. With the support of Wang Chang, Yang Li and the others, as well as the help of the Mermaid Princess and the Demon Ancestor, the outcome was already decided. The dragon's army was defeated. Those who escaped died. And the people of the dragon-slaying palace were chasing after them. It could be said that this battle was already over. Looks like we don't need to go. Madman said. Qin Feiyang nodded. The two of them turned around and flew into the sky like lightning. Soon they landed beside Qin Batian. At this moment, there were already beads of sweat on Qin Batian's forehead. His eyes were solemn as his divine power continued to pour into the domain of severance, sealing the space-time storm. Where's Ancestor Dragon? Dragon Sovereign immediately asked. Dead. Black Dragon Ancestor Dragon's spatial divine item is also in my hands. Qin Feiyang sneered. Damn it. Dragon Sovereign roared. Qin Feiyang ignored him and looked at Qin Batian asking, Ancestor, how is it? Not good. Dragon Sovereign's strength is beyond imagination. I'm afraid even the domain of severance won't be able to trap her for long. Qin Batian shook his head. Qin Feiyang's heart sank. Dragon Sovereign is our biggest enemy. If we don't get rid of her, all kinds of accidents can happen. Yi Zhong landed beside Qin Feiyang and said. Qin Feiyang nodded. Dragon Sovereign roared. Yi Zhong, do you want me to die so badly? Yi Zhong looked up at Dragon Sovereign and sighed. Now that things have come to this, is there any point in saying this? Dragon Sovereign said. Then let me ask you, do you really have the heart to watch Qin Feiyang and the others kill me? Yi Zhong's expression froze. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said. Master, don't be fooled by her. Don't worry. Yi Zhong smiled slightly and looked up at Dragon Sovereign again. I have let go of those things in the past. You humans are really heartless bastards. Dragon Sovereign said angrily. What qualifications do you have to scold Master? For you, Master created the Dragon God Palace and repeatedly entered the Nether King's hell to find heaven-defying divine weapons for you dragons. It can be said that for you, Master has almost become a sinner for all eternity. And you even now are still blaming him. Where's your conscience? Qin Feiyang roared. This woman was really disgusting. Too self-righteous. Everything revolved around her. And she never reflected on herself. Did she really think of herself as an empress? A sinner for all eternity. Hee hee. Ha ha. The Dragon Sovereign looked like he had gone mad. He looked at Yi Zhong and said, It's fine now, right? You helped Qin Feiyang destroy my dragon race, washing away your sins and becoming an existence revered by everyone. In your eyes, is this old man such a person? If this old man really cared about fame and fortune, would this old man create the Dragon God Palace? If back then, you could trust this old man a little more and not doubt this old man, would this old man leave the dragons? Don't think of this old man as the same as you. This old man doesn't care about these things at all. Yi Zhong shook his head. Yes, you see it lightly, you are great, you are noble. But what if I tell you that I killed Feng Li? Dragon Sovereign laughed sinisterly. What? Yi Zhong's gaze suddenly trembled. Feng Li? Qin Feiyang and Frenzy were stunned. Who was this? Beast Sovereign said. Feng Li is your master's wife, Yi Shuer's grandmother. So it's master's wife. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization, and then he looked at Dragon Sovereign in shock. You actually killed master's wife. That's right. Back then, when your master married your master's wife, he almost cut off contact with Dragon Sovereign. This lord felt uncomfortable looking at it, so I quietly killed her. Because only when your master's wife is dead, your master will wholeheartedly work for this lord. Also Yi Shui's parents were also killed by this lord, Dragon Sovereign said. What? Yi Zhong's body trembled again. Back then, this lord told you that they died under the claws of beasts, but in fact, it was this lord who personally sent them to hell. And the result was as I expected. After they died, you followed this lord wholeheartedly and worked hard for this lord. To be honest, this lord has to thank them. Otherwise, how could I let you do so many things for me, dragons? Dragon Sovereign laughed. Snake and Scorpion, Snake and Scorpion. Beast Sovereign roared. Never would he have thought that Yi Zhong's wife, son, and daughter-in-law would die in the hands of this woman. Cloud Sovereign, Lu Xingyang, and Qin Batian were also shocked. They didn't expect Dragon Sovereign to be so ruthless. How is it? How do you feel now? Do you want to kill me to avenge them? Dragon Sovereign stared at Yi Zhong and laughed. Shut up. Qin Feiyang shouted angrily and looked at Yi Zhong worriedly. Master, you must calm down. Yi Zhong's hands were clenched tightly together as he stared at Dragon Sovereign, his eyes red. This was the first time Qin Feiyang had seen his master like this. One could imagine how big of a blow this sudden truth had to him. What did they do wrong? You want to kill them? Suddenly, Yi Zhong roared. Like a wild beast that had gone mad, he charged into the domain of severance and attacked Longzuan. Don't go in. Qin Feiyang's face changed. But it was too late. Dragon Sovereign smiled coldly, stepped forward, and grabbed Yi Zhong's arm. At the same time, he raised his other hand and smashed Yi Zhong's chi-si with a palm. At that moment, Dragon Sovereign grabbed Yi Zhong's neck and looked at Qin Feiyang. Let this lord out immediately, otherwise this lord will kill him. Damn it! Qin Feiyang was annoyed. This was what he was worried about. Master was only at the Great Perfection Undead stage. How could he be Dragon Sovereign's opponent? Long Zun only wanted to capture Honorable Master, and use Honorable Master to threaten him. Then he could only refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.